I am also sick of the online left weaponizing the shit against my partner. Like, seriously, I'm the one that gets to go to bed with her every night. And, yeah, no, neither of us really sleep. You wonder why we haven't streamed lately.
Hey everybody. So a lot of stuff's gone on recently, and you know us, we like to take situations that are happening online and use them as means to teach, right? These are teachable moments. They're things that we can take from. And so something that we wanted to cover is, well, this. There is a thing we have noticed on the online left, and this also happens within the right. This also happens within just general society, is that we seem reticent or resistant to believing victims. And there seems to be a number of reasons why this is. And we want to talk about it because it's something we've noticed a lot lately.
Mm-hmm.
Every time somebody comes out with some sort of allegation, if the person is not particularly well liked, or they have a lot of background, people will use this as like a false belief to sort of like cancel out what they're alleging. People will in some ways try to start poking at their story, trying to tear it apart. And this all comes from the same place. There's some aspect of either the person in question or the situation that is somehow untenable to them. And it can be something so difficult because here's the problem. Culture is not just crappy. One of the reasons why it's so awful, and this is something, we've looked at recently, is there are studies that show that people who go through assault and are disbelieved, their trauma symptoms are worse, meaning that people who are disbelieved for no reason other than personal animosity, you're actually doing harm. And I don't mean offense, I mean harm. You are exacerbating their trauma. This is what we talked about earlier, where, a trans kid needs support in order for them to have a higher likelihood of survival. In the same way, in order for someone to be a survivor of, or they have to, at some level, have support and be seen and be understood. But when you're somebody who is either disliked or a public figure or whatnot, it becomes public discourse.
One thing that I want to add and really illuminate for everyone is that everyone can be affected by culture. Everyone can have biases in it. I've been in progressive spaces and watched people go, yeah, but when, walking alone at night or wearing some really revealing clothing, wouldn't that attract the wrong sort of people to you? Wouldn't that do that? I've been in progressive spaces and I've heard that. Frankly, neither of those things are true. Luckily, the person facilitating at the time, was really good at handling those kinds of questions. Everybody can have these biases. Our school system as a whole doesn't even have consistently good or decent, sexuality education, right? So how can we expect anyone, left or right, liberal or libertarian, whatever, to have any kind of good mapping system for this stuff? We basically get left to having to educate our own groups and our own spaces, which sucks because that's not universal. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, 100%. So let's cover the definition first. Culture is a setting, as described by some sociological theories, in which rape is pervasive and normalized due to the setting's attitudes about gender and sexuality. Behaviors commonly associated with culture include victim blaming, slut shaming, sexual objectification, trivializing, denial of widespread, refusing to acknowledge the harm caused by sexual violence, or some combination. So really good examples of culture are jokes about in prison. Another good example is what she was wearing, or why'd she take so long to come out with these things. People will try to find some way to nickel and dime a person out of their allegations, ignoring the fact that, well, why didn't you say no? Well, because there's such a thing as, paralysis, where the person freezes up and shuts down. Well, why did you wear that outfit? The outfit has nothing to do with it. She could be literally naked walking down the street. Not a thing. Well, why did you set down your drink? Because people make mistakes, and that doesn't mean that she deserves to be harmed. He, she, they, doesn't matter. I'm using she only because femmes tend to be the ones most often targeted. The notion of culture was developed by second-wave feminists, primarily in the United States, at the beginning of the 1960s. Critics of the concept dispute its existence or extent, arguing that the concept is too narrow, or that although there are cultures where rape is pervasive, the very idea of culture can imply that it is not the rapist who is somehow at fault, but society as a whole that enables. Critics of this line of criticism have disputed the notion that only one party needs to be at fault, noting that the perpetrator can be the primary wrongdoer, those who have helped cover it up or harass the victim acting as accomplices, and that thus, also according to them, the wider society and culture can still be blamed for it before its collective influence on these individuals. So before, and I'll get to this later, but back when we worked with Beyond Safe Words,
Talking about the surveillance
she
stuff?
would talk about the way in which social ecology would create circumstances by which an abuser could then target you, and then others would become surveillance for the abuser. Now, her stuff was based around, kink communities and things like that, non-kink shaming, discussions of abuse in kink communities. But this can be true in any group. The term rape culture was first used in the 1970s by second-wave feminists in the United States and applied to contemporary American culture as a whole. During the 1970s, feminists had begun to engage in consciousness-raising efforts designed to educate the public about the prevalence of rape. Previously, according to Canadian psychology professor Alexandra Rutherford, most Americans assume that rape, incest, and wife beating are rare. Again, based on the data, if I remember correctly, 1 in 3.
Some of our articles, I think, will go into some of the updated data as well.
Mm-hmm. Things to look out for, right? That kind of add to this, right? Closely related to slut shaming, victim blaming. We can talk about these down here. Sexualization. Sexualization and sexual objectification are practices that contribute to the normalization of hypersexualized perceptions of women, which is a theme in rape culture. Hypersexualized or pornographic media is often attributed with perpetuating aggressive behaviors and attitudes supporting violence against women. I'm going to push back on this. One of the things that I have seen data on, and I will find that article someday, but I have seen data on the fact that in areas where pornography is more ubiquitous, rape rates went down. So there's an argument to be made that there's a question of correlation. Is it that having this more sexualization thus decreases things, or does it increase it? There seems to be some mixed answers on that. This idea that it reinforces misogynistic belief is viable, but again, the question is that actually the case?
Well, and this is a really hard one too, because we're talking about interdisciplinary studies. When you have a culture where there are certain overarching themes in media, right, that we see over and over and over again, where does that start to affect things? And we can make some arguments that no, it really, really does. And where pornography fits into that is a much, much larger conversation and kind of a hard one to pin down, honestly.
Victim blaming is a phenomenon in which a victim of a crime is partially or entirely attributed as responsible for the transgression committed against them. For instance, a victim of a crime in the case of rape or is asked questions by the police in an emergency room or in a courtroom that suggests that the victim was doing something, acting in a certain way, or wearing clothes that may have provoked the perpetrator, therefore making the transgression against the victim their fault. Victim blaming may also occur among a victim's peers, and college students have reported being ostracized if they report rape against them. Weird. Didn't expect that.
No one expected to hear that one.
Particularly if the alleged perpetrator is a popular figure or noted athlete. And again, the argument focus tends to be how not to be raped, as opposed to, feeding into this notion of provoking, as opposed to how not to do rape. In the UK, victim blaming is a systemic problem in many regional police forces. This is especially apparent in regards to failing to properly protect victims of grooming gangs. These gangs typically repeatedly abuse and rape the same person over a long period of time, often over years. According to former detective and child and women's safety campaigner Maggie Oliver, it is extremely typical to criminalize the victim, To investigate a very organized gang of perhaps 20 men is very labor intensive. It's far easier to dismiss the victim as being drunk or as being guilty of a public order offense. Slut shaming may be considered similar to victim blaming in that there is a combination of someone who has been involved in a sexual event or events. The key difference is that victim blaming involves the person being condemned for being a victim who has provoked their attacker, and slut shaming is based upon the person being condemned for their willing participant in a sexual event. Slut shaming describes the way people are made to feel guilty or inferior for certain sexual behaviors or desires that deviate from traditional or orthodox gender expectations. We're going to come back to this, but this is important because this is where we get into some of the stuff around consent we'll talk about. Because in the actual discussion of consent, we're going to be using the Planned Parenthood Fry's model. But in that, one of the things it talks about is the idea of specific is one of the key terms. And so one of the things that happens is you can be a giant slut. I'm giving you permission. You can be a giant slut. But when you are a giant slut, just because you agree to one act doesn't mean that you agreed to another. You agreed to a specific act, not the additionally new one. This is where we get in trouble because what happens is people will ignore assault against someone who is sexually provocative because they think that consent is a blanket statement when it is not. A really good example of this is people sexually assaulting sex workers. People will act as if that is not a crime. In fact, you will see people on the right, especially incels, literally like talk about, well, it's wrong because you're stealing. They ignore the violation and the problem. It's just you're stealing from this person who's selling their wares. Moving on. Normally, this would be the point where I would bring up a website and it would have a definition of like, what are we talking about when we talk about rape or sexual assault? And here's the trick. They're all different. If you want an example of this, go check out Sage's video about why she hasn't been streaming. Because it's kind of a big deal. But the short version is depending on which websites you look at, you will get different definitions that either lean more heavily towards what the laws are and which change by state in the US.
Or federally even.
Or even at the federal level, to some degree, seem to have some level of subjectivity. For example, what happened to Sage, which is her story to tell, not mine, but what happened to Sage meets many definitions of sexual assault. But according to some, it does not. Now, my argument would be is the more inclusive definitions are the better ones because those more inclusive ones are less likely to miss certain types of people. To be exclusive with your definition leads to excluding people who may have genuinely been through trauma because the reality is the only way to tell that someone's really been assaulted is to see the effects it's had on them. And there are telltale signs. So let's talk about those because rather than do this thing of, well, this is assault and this isn't. No. The people that play the semantics games like this are bad people. I'm being really clear here. If someone plays a semantics game about what is or what is not assault or rape, do not be alone with that person.
Yep. Well, I want to be clear here as well. When we're talking about this stuff, because this is such a broad category, okay, and it's a massively broad category. You could be talking about a whole different range of situations, right? And one situation may not look like another situation, right? And so I think it's important that we keep in mind that sexual assault can range in severity and type and actions that happen to people, right? There isn't just one way to be assaulted.
Yeah, people who conflate the act itself with the effects. Because again, the act itself only matters in regards to some degree what its causal effects are, right? So this is the model we're using for consent. And I want to bring this up because this will be important later.
And this has been really, really helpful to us over the years. We've done a number of videos with this. Particularly Kink at Pride, we looked at things with this model as well.
Correct. So this is the Fry's model used by Planned Parenthood. It is based. And what it stands for is freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. So a consensual act must be something the person gives freely. That is, there can be no coercion.
Mm-hmm.
It must be reversible, which means you must be able to stop it at any point.
Yep. with no consequences. You have to have a way to
No
say,
punishment. Yeah.
Yep, you have to have a way to say no.
The person must be informed of everything around the act. That means that you know why you're doing the thing.
And this could be the situation around it. This could be physical stuff like testing. This could be somebody's emotions about the act. Any number of things can be included in there.
And a good part of it informed is, I'll give you an example. Somebody being stealthed. Now, this came up as a big thing earlier, like a couple of years ago when Tiny was giving someone shit online for being stealthed. And what stealthing is basically midway during sex, taking off the condom and not telling the other person. And you can say, oh, well, how did the person not know? I'm sorry. As a person who knows people with vaginas and also has one themselves, there are areas that are sensitive. There are areas that not. Honestly, it is hard to tell sometimes what a thing is.
It depends on what condom you're using too, and
a lot of things. So
5,000 other. Plus, some people just freeze up when, oh God, something fucking changed. The thing I really want to get home is that just because somebody consents in one situation to something, to some act, does not mean that they would consent if that situation were to change.
Correct. And that gets into the thing of, if you consented to have sex with a person with a condom and they took that condom off, the situation has changed, and thus this is no longer a consensual act unless you consented to the removal of the condom. We'll come back to this, but this is important. Enthusiastic. This doesn't mean you have to be jumping for joy and be excited, but it does mean you have to be down for what's going on.
You genuinely want to be in this situation.
Yeah. I generally look at it as, if we're doing any kind of sexual act, if the person's like answer is like a maybe, the answer is no. Like, you need to let me know directly that you're down for this. And that can sometimes happen through verbal interaction. That can happen through, like, if the person's like being physical with me and gives me signals for those stuff, you know, sometimes I'll check in, sometimes I'll go with it. Of course, going slow to see if there's any lines I cross. Like, this is the stuff you have to do. You want the person to be enthusiastic, because who the hell wants a partner who's kind of wishy-washy about it? That sounds awful.
Yeah. Mark Manson's book, Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Puppy knows exactly where I'm going with this. He's got a thing in there with don't do anything.
Hell yeah rule.
Unless the answer is hell yeah. Genuinely show the fuck up and be there, right? And I think it's important to remember too that enthusiastic goes for people of any orientation. Okay, any amount of sex drive or little sex drive, whatever. It is fine. You are all included here. So we get that question a lot. Where do ace people fit into this? No, just as long as you genuinely want to be in the situation. Oh, and also you can be nervous and maybe a little anxious even about doing something and still genuinely want to be in that situation. That's a talk to have with your partner. That's a talk to make sure that, like, hey, this is where I'm at with this, but I really do want to try this new thing. That's totally fine. Just genuinely want to be in that situation.
And then last but not least is specific. So the person needs to know the act they're doing. If you have been cleared for vaginal intercourse, right, then that is where your PP goes. If you have not been cleared for, say, another hole, and you do that, that is bad. The person needs to know what they're consenting to. Not just informed, but they need to know the specific act. You can't be vague about it.
Yeah. Now, even in cases with like kink, where maybe you do want to surprise your partner, no, you still need to get consent for the individual acts that you are doing. If you are in kink doing something and your partner agreed to slapping a certain location, and you guys haven't discussed this other thing that you really want to try that you think would be cool in the moment, no, don't do it. You gotta wait so you can get proper consent for the new thing.
Yes. Beard Panda asked a really good question. If there are people who are indifferent to sex, say ace people, they're like, sure, why not? Is that okay? I hear people talk about this a lot. So here's my argument. I've never been super comfortable with the argument where people say things like, oh, I did it to make you happy. I get bothered by that personally, but that doesn't matter for most people. Depends on the person, I suppose. My answer is this. Unless the person is sex repulsed, most ace people may engage in sex at some point. And some people who experience no sexual attraction may still engage in masturbation, just as like a daily thing they do to relieve stress. It's not because they're like attracted to anyone. It just might be more of an abstract thing that they just take care of, like brushing their teeth. The thing is that with ace people, this is a really strong conversation you have to have with your partner. If your partner is ace, then you may need to find compromises to be able to make sure both of your needs are met. For For example, if your partner is gray ace, there are going to be times when they are available and times when they're not. The one thing I want to make really clear with ace people, and this is not me throwing them under the bus, this is true of anybody. We're going to talk about this in a little bit, but there's this old adage that says that rape is not about sex, it's about power. And we're going to debunk that a little bit because, well, yes, it is about power. Sex is kind of the weapon. It's kind of like saying someone was held up at gunpoint and then saying the gun doesn't matter. Now, what I want to add to that is that, and this is something to keep in mind, because of the nature of the power aspect, this does mean that just like any other demographic, someone who is ace can engage in assault. Even if they have a low sex drive, they can still engage in assault. And again, if the person's, say, like somewhere in the mid-spectrum, like Demi or Gray, that it's a moot point, because at that point, we have to go by what their report of their sexual arousal is or what their attraction is to the other person. So again, this is where it gets into. So I want to just make it clear that being ace does not prevent somebody from crossing these lines. And if you want to talk to your ace partner about the situation, you need to have in-depth conversations about it. Go, ZZ.
I wanted to look at Beard Panda's question from another slightly other angle, specifically to somebody's response is sure, why not? And say that they are, I think it said indifferent in there. Sorry, chat's really tiny right now. This still falls back into, is this person enthusiastic to be in that situation? I would not feel comfortable if my partner was indifferent, right? This is supposed to be something that is intimate. Okay, maybe you're doing a hookup, I don't know, but generally there is a lot of intimacy. This is a very sensitive part of people. If somebody was feeling indifferent or giving me those signals, that's not really giving me like the hell yeah. That's not really giving me a yes. Like, I need to know for certain that they want to be in that situation.
Now, one thing I'll add to that is that ZZ is 100% correct in my opinion. Here's the thing, though, and I want to just add that onto this, is that to me, I think it's really important to ask your ace partner, and then we'll get off this tangent, is what are you getting out of it? Like, I know that sounds a little bit cynical, but there is a question there. What are you getting out of this? Because to some degree, if they're enjoying this because you're enjoying it, or they feel the intimacy, right? The orgasm doesn't really matter all that much, but they're, the being with you kind of matters because they like you. Fine. As long as they're enthusiastic, as long as they're good, cool.
Well, and this helps the act feel mutual, right? Like, that's got two people engaging in something. That would help with a lot of the mutual feeling of it.
Yep. So again, one of the things that we want to talk about is, what does it look like when someone's been assaulted? Because rather than getting lost in this semantic hellscape of what is assault, what is rape, I am going to say it is any sexual activity, either in person or over a digital medium, that causes a person to feel like their consent has been breached and results in some level of the following: physical symptoms of sexual trauma, difficulty sleeping, headaches, concentration challenges, chest pains, stomach difficulties. Psychological signs: difficulty concentrating, random emotional outbursts, self-harm, substance abuse. Emotional effects: emotional numbing to avoid feeling any specific pains, avoiding all persons, places, and things that might trigger a memory of the event, intrusive thoughts that play back traumatizing scenes. Hyperarousal, also known as hyperactivity. So this is where the person is constantly keyed up in a fear response. Basically what happens is, even without triggers. So this is the term for this is generally hypervigilance. I don't know why they used hyperactive. It's hypervigilance.
Your nervous system is generally just
active, but
active
but
and
when you're
aroused,
hyperactive, you think ADHD.
That is true. And these are just some of the symptoms, right? Some of this, there's could be a lot of overlap of other symptoms as well, but there is a marked change in somebody and how they are going about the world and their day.
So the effects of sexual violence include mental health challenges. When a person is coerced or manipulated into a sexual activity, this can produce clear symptoms of psychological harm. Severe depression may follow the overwhelming pain that results from sexual assault. Anxiety can also manifest as survivors can feel the need to approach situations with extreme fear and caution. Assault could also lead to harmful behaviors such as self-harm or substance abuse. In severe cases, survivors of sexual violence may begin to consider suicide. There also may be a tendency not just to avoid things, but also go out of your way to reenact it. That gets into some psychological discussions, but that is a thing.
Or continuing to engage in situations
that are risky. Yeah. Challenge in a form of sort of like graduated self-harm. Physical effects. A survivor of assault may notice bodily changes following the event. These changes may not always be ascribed to trauma endured, but could be difficult, direct results of its effects. Challenges in the lower abdomen, chronic pains, and sleeping difficulties are common consequences. Likewise, eating disorders, chronic fatigue, diabetes, and heart disease are all linked to damage of sexual assault.
Want me to read some?
Yeah, you want to do behavioral outcomes? If you
Yeah.
need me to increase the size, let me know.
A little bit bigger would be nice. Assault can also impact survivors in their social interactions with others. Survivors may begin to avoid physical contact with others and may avoid sex altogether. This pain can also prevent the chances of placing trust in people.
What we're saying here is that rather than getting hung up on a definition of what assault is, and again, Sage makes this argument, so her video is a really good example. Netspace put it in the chat, in the site chat. The reality is that we can see the effects on the person. If a person alleges assault and we see them struggling in very real, meaningful ways, to me, that is evidence to support their allegation. Because the reality is that you can't just make this shit up. Like, if you're suddenly having panic attacks because you're getting near a trigger, or you just avoid sex altogether, you stop dating, you end up breaking up with your partner, like, there are things that are going to be clues. The eating disorder thing is really interesting because, again, one of the things when you feel out of control, and this is something that's related to eating disorders, is when somebody struggles with an eating disorder, one of the factors that can sometimes come up is it's around control. Sometimes people will gain them because they didn't feel like they had control growing up or didn't feel like they had control in their life. Well, being assaulted completely takes the control away from you. So someone might start an eating disorder both to maybe modify their body so they don't feel like they'll be a target, especially if everyone tells them that it was because of something they wore or how they look. But additionally, it's also a form of control. I can at least control my eating.
Well, and this can be this could go, lack of eating or overeating as well, or feeling too anxious to eat. Any of those kind of things can be in there.
Mm-hmm. So, treatments include cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm not going to read all these. I'm just going to go over them briefly. Group therapy. This one's really, really great, especially when you're going. You have everybody's been a survivor. Really solid. Psychodynamic therapy. Medications, SSRIs, right, to increase the brain's amount of serotonin. Eating is a stim for me. Yeah, that can also be a thing. So yeah, long story short is that
EMDR is also one that I've seen listed on a lot of the websites we're going to look at.
Correct.
Yeah, EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprogramming, and can be a very intensive therapy, but also very effective at getting at trauma.
Facts and healing after sexual trauma. I won't go through all this because some of these are going to overlap. But again, sexual assault is an event that involves unwanted, non-consensual sexual conduct or behavior towards someone. This includes sexual behaviors. Those who cannot give consent, such as children and those with disabilities. Sexual assault can be some of the most psychologically damaging form of trauma. Notice here, nothing here said physical, right? I want you to keep that in mind, because one of the major things that has been pushed against Sage has been, in regards to her coming out with her allegations, has been that this happened over a digital medium. That doesn't change anything. You look for the symptoms. You look for the things that support this. And I've seen the effects this has on my partner. Again, definitions of sexual trauma. Broadly defined, sexual assault is any unwanted sexual contact or behavior performed without consent or permission, including non-consent due to age or disability. Rape is a form of sexual assault defined by unwanted sexual penetration forced through threats or physical means. Sexual trauma refers to the lasting adverse effects on the survivor due to sexual assault.
Also, notice disability is in there. That is something that we'll probably come back to. But when we're getting consent, it's important to consider, okay, is this person able to consent? There's a lot of different factors that can go into that one.
With children, perpetrators are usually acquaintances, family members, someone who knows the kid. One research survey showed that 18% of high school girls and 12% of high school boys say they experienced unwanted sexual experience. The prevalence of sexual assaults drastically increases in children with disabilities. Just going to leave that there. Awful. Military. Sexual trauma within the military. Actually, do you want to read this one, Kisses?
Sexual trauma within the military has received increased attention in recent years. A 2014 study looked at unwanted sexual behavior, which included sexual assault, sexual harassment, and gender discrimination. In this study, a large-scale survey found that between 18,200 and 22,400 active duty service members experienced a sexual assault within the prior year, which equates to about 1% of active duty men and about 5% of active duty women.
1 out of 20.
Yeah. And remember, too, that the military also has built-in dynamics dealing with power dynamics of people, right? That the entire military is set up that way. Keep in mind that plays a factor in this too.
Women. By some estimates, 17 to 25% of women will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime. Similar to children, women are likely to be acquainted with their perpetrator. Some research shows that around 20% of women attending college will experience sexual assault or misconduct. That's where the 1 in 5 statistic comes from. Sexually assaulted women are more likely to develop PTSD than men, and their symptoms are likely to last much longer than they do for men. Women are more likely to become emotionally numb and to psychologically distance themselves from the traumatic event. These behaviors may come across to others as the survivor not remembering aspects of the event or not wanting to get support or report the incident. So this is a big one, is when you'll see people who have been assaulted and they will just bury it. It doesn't help that the criminal justice system literally puts these people on display and utterly, interrogates them. So even the prospect of bringing this stuff to justice, like how many rape kits have basically just sat in vaults with nothing being done with them? Like, again, this women in this regard, again.
Well, and by and large, officers aren't trained to even how to hear out these people or how to even investigate any of it. They have no psychological training at all. So,
although men are less likely to experience sexual assault than women, it still occurs. By some estimates, around 1% to 3% of men are sexually assaulted. The perpetrator is also male for most men who are raped. Yep. If someone wants to find me the percentages on trans people, I know the ones for trans women are real awful. The limitations of generalizing trauma as PTSD. Most people who experience trauma like sexual assault do not go on to develop full-blown PTSD. If a person is experiencing significant emotional, physical, and functional issues after trauma, a PTSD diagnosis may provide some relief and direction for treatment. However, it might not offer a complete understanding of the person's experience, especially if the person is experiencing something broader or in addition to PTSD, like depression. So this is when you get into diagnoses that are not in the DSM. For example, the complex PTSD. We'll have to talk about that one sometime on stream. But things like that, depending on when and how old the person happened, this can also be one of the factors that leads to the development of borderline personality disorder. It's essential to be open and honest with mental health professionals to receive proper treatment for you. Again, symptoms and long-term effects: anger, shock, fear, hyper-alertness or hypervigilance, difficulty sleeping, nightmares, reliving the experience, difficulty concentrating, preoccupation, ruminating, minimizing or denying what happened to cope, feeling a sense of betrayal. One study found that around 12 to 24% of those who experience a non-sexual assault trauma develop PTSD. However, survivors for sexual trauma, the number raises to 80%. Yeah, again, Alice makes a really good point in YouTube chat. These are the statistics for people that report. And we know for a fact that only 50% of people report. So these numbers actually could be higher depending on a number of factors. So dealing with intimacy issues.
It's normal to have changes in sexual desire after a sexual assault. Intimacy will differ for each person and can range from not wanting to be intimate to being more sexual than was typical before the incident.
Yep.
Sexual assault can also cause a person to decrease safer sex practices. Following a sexual assault trauma, a person may have difficulty becoming aroused, not finding sex enjoyable, or experience distressing physical, emotional, or mental responses during sex. Giving yourself time to slowly figure out what you are comfortable with and what is enjoyable is essential. Then communicate your needs with your partner and clarify if you want to stop. Talking about intimacy issues with a mental health professional may be helpful.
Steps to address and overcome sexual trauma. In addition to PTSD, people who have experienced sexual trauma have an increased risk of developing mental illnesses such as bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, and substance use disorder. I would also say borderline, depending on their age. Experiencing something as traumatic as a sexual assault often causes the survivor to feel alone. As a result, it is common to not want to tell anyone what happened and feel shame about it. It can also be challenging to think or talk about the incident. So finding ways to build safety and trust can be helpful places to start. This might include talking to a reliable person, doing something that offers a sense of control, and engaging in activities that bring enjoyment and a feel of safety. Support for someone else. Knowing someone that has experienced sexual assault can be difficult and can bring up feelings of anger and helplessness. This can also lead to secondary survivor trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 4 times more likely sounds right to me, New Flesh. Remind the person that you are there for them when they need you. You can check in occasionally, but don't pressure them to open up. offer practical help.
If they want to go get an exam or report, offer a ride or offer to help them research for something, for finding a group or a therapist. If they want to open up, show them that you are listening, that you can handle whatever they tell you, and that you believe them. Be patient with the person and remember that each person's experience and each person's experience and needs differ.
And we already talked about the therapy stuff, so we don't need to worry about that.
And I'll add a little bit to this too, as long as we're here in this particular article. Active listening skills can be really fucking helpful. Repeating back what you heard, giving cues during the conversation that you've been listening, telling them directly, I believe you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I support you. Just say that directly to people. And I know this had some offers for practical help, but also if a person doesn't want to report, that is also still their choice. And you still got to support that. If they want to be open about it, if they want to not be open about it, that is still got to be their choice. At the end of the day, they're the ones that need to live with the consequences for that. So you've got to go with whatever they're kind of feeling at the moment. And if they change their mind later, that's okay. They can.
What is rape trauma syndrome? So stages of rape trauma syndrome: acute, occurs soon after sexual assault, categorized as expressed, controlled, or shocked disbelief. Outward adjustment occurs after the acute phase, can last weeks to months or longer. Victim does not appear to be traumatized anymore, but definitely still is. Resolution, integration, final stage of rape trauma syndrome. Victim comes to terms with the assault and works to move on.
So rape trauma syndrome is a form of post-traumatic stress disorder. It is a specific version of PTSD that occurs after sexual assault. It is most commonly associated with rape, but other forms of sexual assault, such as attempted rape, can also lead to RTS. While it is considered more of an emotional and psychological condition than it is a physical one, rape trauma is regarded as a syndrome because there are standard and consistent behaviors, thoughts and feelings that occur consistently in victims of sexual assault. The term rape trauma syndrome was coined by nurse Anne Wolbert Burgess and sociologist Linda Light Fulstrom in 1974.
Stages of rape trauma syndrome we just looked at: acute, outward adjustment, resolution, and integration phase. The acute stage of RTS occurs in moments, days, or weeks after sexual assault. The Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, or RAIN, says that victims fall into one of three categories. Expressed, the victim is outwardly upset and emotional. Controlled, rather than outwardly upset, they are in shock and behave as if everything is okay. Shock disbelief, the victim is disoriented and may have a hard time recollecting their attack.
After the initial or acute phase, the next linear stage of rape trauma syndrome is the outward adjustment stage. During this stage, which can last anywhere from weeks to months or even longer, the sexual assault victim does not appear to be as traumatized and shaken as they were during the acute phase that immediately followed the assault. Even though a person may appear to be okay and moving on with life, this second phase of RTS makes clear that quite often that appearance is not true. Regardless of the coping technique, people moving through this phase are often still incredibly traumatized. Maybe try to rationalize or justify the assault. So resolution or integration. The third and final stage of rape trauma syndrome is when the victim has come to terms with the fact that the sexual assault occurred and does their best to move on from it. They may never forgive their assailant or feel entirely comfortable sexually again, but they make a concerted effort to move forward with their life regardless. Unfortunately, this phase is indefinite, and some people may experience a relapse into one of the two previous stages.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate that. Before we go on with this, because most of this is just going to be symptoms and stuff we've covered, so I want to keep moving ahead because we've got a lot to go over.
Yeah, I think, particularly with this part, I think the big takeaway is knowing that people can move in and out of these phases, right? And that you could be in any one of these phases for any length of time. Healing from this kind of thing doesn't have to, yes, there are linear stages that they've outlined, but what they're saying, you can relapse into the past one. So healing doesn't have to be linear. It can happen at different rates, different paces, and in different formats. And you may find, years later that there maybe is a part of what you went through that you haven't really dealt with. Maybe you dealt with, parts that you remembered, or you dealt with most of, what you knew about at the time, but later you might find that this is still affecting you.
So now we're going to cover some things that kind of connect to sexual assault in more sort of the underlying systems under the hood that create rape culture. One of the ones that I think is really important that we need to talk about today is this, and this will come up again later, the perfect victim myth. This one is going to be a little rough, but bear with me. The idea of the perfect victim is a patriarchal concept that is typically used when discussing victims of sexual assault. This phenomenon often raises a series of predictable questions. What types of victims are viewed as credible sources? What types of victims are worthy of justice? Did they deserve what happened to them? Will they be believed in court? What is the perfect victim?
The perfect victim, according to Dr. Jason B. Whiting, is someone who is weak or vulnerable and involved in a respectable activity at the time of victimization. Therefore, the victim must be blameless in all aspects of the interaction with their offender, who is a stranger to them. This checklist suggests that the core facets of the perfect victim are vulnerability, believability, and respectability. In 1986, Nils Christie first introduced the concept of the ideal victim as someone capable of garnering the most support and sympathy from society. Quote, the ideal victim survivor must be white, cisgender, and feminine. In his article, Christie offers an example referring to the victim as she. He aligns her with the, quote, desirable notions of white feminine demeanor, end quote. He also notes that she is unknown to the perpetrator and thus has not precipitated her own victimization.
So you see here, there is no such thing as the perfect sexual assault victim. Some women are attacked violently and might scream and shout for help. Others are threatened or coerced and stay silent. Others are unconscious, etc. There is no perfect way a victim of rape should or will act. In a 2017 Vice article, Gloria J. Brown Marshall, associate professor at John Lake College of Criminal Justice, explained that respectability is a presupposed fact for some victims, whereas people of color, poor people, and immigrants are tasked to create respectability. That is, to justify their deserving empathy and justice as victims. So just add trans people into that because that'll give you some stuff. While respectability is a required characteristic for the perfect victim, so too is being the correct race, gender, social class, and sexual orientation.
If the ideal victim survivor must be white, cisgender, feminine, what about everyone who doesn't fit that description? Researchers at Fairleigh Dickinson University analyzed U.S. workplace discrimination data between 1997 and 2016 and found that Black women were significantly more likely to be subjected to sexual harassment at work than their white peers. Additionally, a 2022 Trades Union Congress report highlighted that 54% of Black women reported unwanted touching at work, compared with 34% of white women. The disproportionate rates of harassment for Black women may be seen as an example of misogynoir, which can be defined as the hatred of aversion to or prejudice against Black women.
Black women always have to be the perfect victim to get some sort of sympathy or help. It's exhausting. The UK government's 2020 sexual harassment survey found that 75% of victim survivors who have at least one discriminative characteristic, such as race, disability, age, sex, felt that their identity played a factor in their harassment. When looking at victimhood through the framework of intersectionality, individuals with multiple identity characteristics experience the world in complex, multifaceted ways, including homophobia, sexism, racism, ableism, religious discrimination, and classism may often be encountered simultaneously. So this explains why you see someone like Sage get so much pushback on Twitter, because Sage is a trans woman. So not only is she a woman, she's a trans woman. And so the thing is, those two intersections lead to this negative outcome, where people then react poorly because they look at her as not the perfect victim, because she wasn't jumped by some dude out of the bushes and she's entirely completely unassailable. The reality is that things are much more complicated.
The narrow definition of what makes the perfect victim encourages scrutinization of victims, rather than holding the alleged perpetrator accountable. In cases of sexual assault, victims undergo a thorough and critical examination. What were they wearing? How much did they have to drink? Why did it take them so long to come forward? Put simply, their accounts are torn apart. If they don't remember the assault, how can we possibly believe them? But if they remember it too clearly, it must be a curated story to ruin a good man's reputation. He shared misconceptions that would deem someone the perfect victim, are structurally dangerous, end quote. Najera Samuhathanathan, a sexual assault counselor, told Elle Australia that this impossible standard hinders victims from coming forward to authorities. As victims face an internal battle of determining whether they are the ideal victim survivor, they are confronted with what Samuhathanathan calls the Goldilocks dilemma. She describes this dilemma as the need to be the perfect survivor, to be someone who has a clear recall of what happened, who came forward merely hours after an assault to report a crime, was not intoxicated, is trustworthy in the eyes of the community, and hopefully someone who can prove their sexual assault with evidence. The societal obsession with scrutinizing victims' responses to their assaults, rather than focusing on the perpetrator and the systemic flaws of the criminal justice system, perpetuates myths regarding sexual violence and victim behavior.
True unless proven false. The shared misconceptions that would deem someone the perfect victim are structurally dangerous to the extent that they only protect a small minority of people. The stark contrast between who is deemed a credible victim and the number of people who have sexual violence in society is a societal failure. Going forward, instead of treating perpetrators as innocent until proven guilty, the focus should undeniably be on the framing of the victim's account as true until proven false. So this will come up more later, but basically 100% all this. You can use this model, and I know when people hear the word patriarchy, they get weird, but again, look at different scenarios you've seen on social media where someone has accused someone of sexual assault or sexual impropriety, and you will see very different experiences. Trans people are silenced on this. African Americans and other people of color are silenced on this. Because if you are not a white, cis, het girl who's an ooh small bean, then you can't be a victim of assault. We have to find some way to nitpick this out of existence.
Well, and notice that status in the community also mattered.
This is an article that I shared online a while back, but it is a big thing. Solving the riddle of rape by deception. Now, we're not going to go through all of this, but basically what this kind of talks about, and I'll just read the first chunk and we'll kind of, when people lie to obtain money, we call it theft. When they lie to enter private property, we call it trespass. When they lie to obtain sex, we have no idea what to call it. Some call it lawful seduction, others call it criminal rape. An Israeli court recently aligned itself with the latter camp when it convicted an Arab man of rape by deception for falsely claiming that he was a Jewish bachelor in order to have sex with a Jewish woman. So too did a Scottish court when it convicted a transgender man, I don't know why they used transgendered man, of sexual intimacy by fraud for failing to reveal his gender history to his girlfriend. Now, let's be clear. The quotations there, DED is just someone being an idiot. But the sexual intimacy by fraud, notices in parentheses, they are not saying this is good. They are saying that this happened because this is a law review. So again, what we're talking about here is the idea that one can coerce somebody through deception, and this can lead to the outcome of this being rape. So again, a really good example of this that's actually legitimate would be stealthing, right? You inform the person you wore a condom, you took it off, that's a thing. I would say these first two cases, I don't really feel comfortable with either of those, but I get why the Israeli court would go after an Arab man because, let's face it, real Zena state, just saying.
Well, and more the point here.
And Scottish court has not been great with trans women, so let's, yeah. Anyway,
well, and more the
or trans
point
people
that,
in general.
Yeah, more the point that we're looking at here is that this is a global phenomenon that has happened all over the place, and this is something that has come up previously in law. There is already a precedent in law for this that, we are still having to deal with.
And the problem is, and what the article's kind of pointing at, is that this is a fuzzy line between permissible sex and unlawful rape. So again, let's talk about the elephant in the room. You're talking to a bunch of trans people. So the thing is, immediately, if you're an idiot, you're going to think this is justifying the trans panic defense. That would be an idiot's take. Mm-hmm. Because what this is saying is that there is a very weird fuzzy line here that needs to be discussed. The trans panic defense is bunk because it is not a form of sexual assault. If the person is presenting as a woman and you thought you were having sex with a woman, no harm, no foul. That does not give you justification to murder somebody or harm them physically. But there are cases where somebody does lie in order to get someone to engage in a sexual act, only for them to find out it is dishonest after the fact. Nightwell said, I love the implicit transphobia in people thinking that they have to pretend that rape by deception or similar don't exist in order to support trans people. Those people are just showing they don't believe trans people are the gender they are. The reason trans people shouldn't be considered doing that is because they're not doing fraud. Yeah. So not only is the idea that you shouldn't be murdered just because you didn't disclose something about your past, but on top of it, the idea that the person being trans somehow is a fraud or dishonesty that leads to that outcome, to lead to this insane thing. It's not a thing. They're the gender they say they are. If you bang a girl, you banged a girl. Go team. Why is it so difficult to classify sex obtained by lies as either lawful seduction or criminal sexual assault? In an influential recent article titled The Riddle of Rape by Deception and the Myth of Sexual Autonomy, Professor Jed Rubenfield suggested that our ambivalence towards punishing sex by deception is the product of a deep fissure in current rape law. More specifically, he claimed that the refusal to broadly criminalize sex by deception is in tension with the modern conception of rape as unconsented to sex. Rape as unconsented sex. If modern rape laws define rape as sex without consent, why does sex that is obtained as a result of deception not satisfy the definition of that offense? Expressed in more general terms, if contemporary rape statutes seek to protect sexual autonomy, why do these laws leave sex by deception largely unpunished? After all, deception typically negates consent outside of rape law, and choices that are the product of deception are generally viewed as to be incompatible with autonomy. That is why if you lie
on forms you have to fill out,
like I was going to say a contract. If you lie on a contract, it voids the contract.
Mm-hmm. Or like if you are consenting to like a medical procedure and something happens that you didn't consent to, that you didn't know about,
you want to read this?
That's bad. In light of this tension, Rubenfield contends that contemporary rape reformers must grapple with what seems like an unsolvable riddle. If they want to hold on to autonomy as the linchpin of rape law, they should broadly criminalize rape by deception. On the other hand, if they want to punish rape by deception only in exceptional cases, they should admit that rape statutes do not primarily seek to enhance sexual autonomy. The challenge presented by this riddle extends well beyond the narrow confines of rape by deception. If there are strong reasons against broadly criminalizing sex obtained by fraud, and if the selective criminalization of rape by deception is truly incompatible with the modern definition of rape as non-consensual sexual intercourse, then both the definition of rape and the rationale that justifies criminalization are in need of a significant overhaul. The riddle of rape by deception thus threatens to unravel the theoretical edifice upon which contemporary rape law is built.
That last sentence is fucking terrifying. The riddle of rape by deception thus threatens to unravel the theoretical edifice upon which contemporary rape law is built. Because in legitimate situations where the person was dishonest, how do you actually criminalize this with the current framing of rape?
Well, and so just to go over a little bit, we kind of are working with multiple frameworks here, okay? We know that our society already has issues with sexual autonomy. That's a thing, okay?
Especially this one.
Yeah. And so a lot of rape law in place, especially like historical stuff, had to do with, property, almost making, your body out to be more of a property at certain points. Heck, there's still stuff where, like, I think one state still even has on the books that, like, a woman is not raped if she's married to the man. By the way, marital rape is totally a thing here, okay? Like, that exists. That's just a thing. And so, when you have sexual autonomy versus, like, ownership, all right, or whatever Bork's version got into the law in that state, we get really confusing and conflicting issues. Because which way do you go? How do you actually take care of both of these things?
Yeah, and I will say, Shakespeare, I will agree with you. The transpanic defense is nonsense and should be banned at every level because it has nothing to do with the argument we're making right now. The argument we're making is that rape by deception is a thing that exists, Transpanic defense is in the transpanic defense and situations where a person does not disclose they are trans is not a situation in which you would call that rape by deception. Just because the Scottish law says that doesn't mean the Scottish law is actually being moral. It just means Scotland sucks.
This gets into, all right, what do we do?
This article argues that the riddle of rape by deception is based on a misunderstanding of the kind of autonomy that lies at the heart of modern rape reform statutes. Properly understood, the chief goal of contemporary rape law is to neutralize the coercion inherent in sexual relationships that takes place in a male-dominated society. Since minimization deception is only tangentially related to this goal, respect for this kind of sexual autonomy that rape law is primarily designed to protect is compatible with selective criminalization of rape by deception. This solution to the riddle of rape by deception not only preserves the conceptual framework that undergirds the modern rape statutes, but also sharpens our understanding of interests that contemporary rape reform is designed to protect. I agree with the term Scotland sucks. I'm just saying in this case, I mean, I love kilts and stuff, but y'all, like, come on now. The argument proceeds in 4 parts. In order to set the stage for a discussion of this kind of autonomy that undergirds modern rape reform and Rubin's formulation of the riddle of rape by deception, part 1 explores the nature and scope of autonomy both outside and within rape law. What emerges is a variety of changing and competing conceptions of consent that promote different degrees of autonomy depending on the circumstances and the conflicting interests at stake in any given interaction. And then they go on to talk about this again, to go over these 4 parts.
And I want to be clear here. One of the things that we talk about a lot on our channel is offense versus harm and what levels of each we are dealing with, right? And that is a big part about how this article talks about how we actually need to be handling this, is actually evaluating the entire situation and what were the consequences of it.
Part 2 shows the comprehending the multidimensional nature of consent and autonomy sharpens our understanding of the core commitments underlying the modern rape reform movement and contemporary scholarship of rape law. A close reading of this literature, along with an understanding of the historical and cultural backdrop against which rape scholars were working at the time, reveals that modern rape reformers were chiefly interested in changing social and legal views regarding the kinds of pressures that ought to vitiate consent to sex. That is, modern rape reform was primarily about securing added female freedom from male coercion, both subtle and overt, and expanding the meaning of coercion beyond patriarchal notions of physical force. More broadly, feminist rape scholarship highlighted the inherent coercive nature of all sex in a patriarchal society, thus calling into question the possibility that any kind of consensual intercourse in a male-dominant culture. This last one is some second wave feminist nonsense. I don't buy this. I really don't like to think of people as so utterly like coerced they can't make their own decisions. Like this bothers me.
Well, and again, this is
just going over the
this
thing.
article is going over where we have been and where like the history is. So
Part 3 solves the riddle of rape by deception. It argues that much of the confusion surrounding rape law in general and the riddle of rape by deception in particular is the product of fundamental misunderstanding of the conceptual nature of autonomy and consent and of the kind of autonomy that lies at the heart of the modern rape reform movement. I'll post this in the links if people want to read the rest of it, but I'll just go over the overview. Part 4 suggests that the framing principles that can provide guidance to courts and legislatures when deciding whether to criminalize sex obtained by deception, when deciding whether to criminalize sex by deception, without intending to exhaustively cover all the cases in which it is sensible to punish sex obtained by misrepresentation, I argue that obvious candidates for criminalization are cases that feature deception that is also coercive, deception that amounts to a breach of trust by a person in a position of authority, and deception that causes significant harm in addition to the infringement of a victim's autonomy. Thus, again, these three arguments completely make the transpanic defense have nothing to do with this. Do you understand why? I argue that obvious candidates for criminalization are cases that feature deception that is also coercive. So that wouldn't fit the transpanic defense. Because there's nothing, because keeping your trans status is not a deception, nor is it inherently, nor is it coercive in any way, shape, or form. Deception that amounts to a breach of trust by a person in a position of authority, a breach of trust by someone in a position of authority. So again, say your professor lies to you and sleeps with you. Yeah, that kind of falls into that. Like, hey, I'm going to give you a 0 if you don't do it. It's like, that's a form of coercion and deception that causes significant harm in addition to the infringement of the victim's autonomy. Again, look at the previous coercion statements. The suggested approach would only selectively criminalize sex obtained by deception. Contrary to what Rubenfeld suggests, such selective criminalization is not intentional with the kinds of sexual autonomy that modern rape statutes seek to protect. As a result, the so-called riddle of rape by deception turns out to be not much of a riddle at all. So we wanted to go over those 2 articles because we want to talk about the reality of how this stuff happens and how difficult it is, because the legal definitions versus the actual moral obligation is very different. Each state has its own definitions of assault. This is why we're not trying to like frame a really hard line definition of assault, because there's going to be a way in which if we frame it one way, it's going to leave someone out who is justified. And I hate false negatives. We'll go over this very quickly, and then there's some other stuff we got to talk about. 16 ways you can stand against rape culture. I'm not going to go over this super in depth. We've already talked about what rape culture is. It's pervasive. It is what it is. 1, create a culture of enthusiastic consent. Freely given consent is mandatory every time. Rather than listening for a no, make sure there is an active yes from all involved. Adopting enthusiastic consent in your life and talk about it. Now, that yes, in my opinion, does not always have to be verbal. If someone is clearly showing that they're interested and they're engaged with what you're doing, great. If the person freezes up and shuts down, you stop. I have never understood people who just keep doing a thing when the other person's not into it. Just saying.
Well, and especially with new partners, get consent. Be sure. Talk to them. Ask them how they're doing.
Yep. Speak out against the root causes. Rape culture is allowed to continue when we buy into the ideas of masculinity that sees violence and dominance as strong and male. Agreed. It also is the underpinning of victim blaming, an attitude that suggests victims rather than the perpetrator bear responsibility for the assault. So again, when discussing cases of sexual violence, a victim's sobriety, clothes, sexuality are irrelevant. Redefining masculinity. We just talked about that. Stop victim blame. We talked about what that is. So this is the one the online left really sucks at. We'll get to that. Have zero tolerance. Establish policies for zero tolerance for sexual harassment and violence in spaces where you live, work, and play. Leaders must be particularly clear that they are committed to upholding a zero tolerance policy, and that it must be practiced every day. So again,
one of the interesting things that we've been doing surgeries is that they have at the hospital, they've got big signs saying what not to do, and especially making it clear that like no, sexual harassment is this, and that, and do not use this kind of language in our waiting rooms. And it's really fucking explicit. So they make it very clear to people.
Broaden your understandings of rape culture, right? So, for example, child marriage, female genital mutilation, marital rape, like understanding that there are these things that still exist out there that are really screwed up, that rob often girls, but really a lot of people have autonomy. Take an intersectional approach. We talked about this already. Know the history of rape culture, right? Rape has been a weapon of war and oppression throughout history. It has been used to degrade women and their communities and for ethnic cleansing and genocide. Again, we know for a fact that Israeli troops are sexually assaulting Palestinians. Like, we just know that. This is because they are trying to demoralize, damage, and essentially commit to the bit as far as genocide. Invest in women. Donate to organizations that empower women. Simple as. UN Women works to end violence. They're really solid too. Listen to survivors. So this is a big one. When someone says they've been assaulted, until evidence is proven to make it false, you need to actually listen. It means active listening. We keep having Time's Up, Me Too, right? All these different movements because people don't get the message. Don't say, why didn't she leave? Do say, we hear you, we see you, we believe you. 11, don't laugh at rape. Seriously. The big one, the notion that a person being assaulted in jail, for example, not okay. Get involved, right? So this is, help with law creation, property ownership, depending on what your job is or what your education is, this is stuff you need to do. This is stuff that I've had to do in my job previously when I had it.
Oh, as far as getting involved, also, help run a booth at your local community festival. You know, there's an art festival. Help run a booth with Planned Parenthood or something.
Or volunteer for another booth.
Or volunteer, yeah. Help bring this kind of knowledge into your community. They're really easy things. You're just volunteering for a day to help give out information and talk to people.
And impunity. To end rape culture, perpetrators must be held accountable. By prosecuting sexual violence cases, we recognize these acts as crimes and send a strong message of zero tolerance. 14, be an active bystander. If you see violence taking place or harassment, speak the fuck up.
Also, if you have friends that are really crappy, call them the fuck out. Like, if they're just saying really dumb shit or really awful shit, or they're laughing at really awful jokes, no, call them out.
Educate the next generation? Duh. Start or join the conversation? Duh. All right. Has anyone seen that recent H-bomb video where he talks about a certain person who I hope is okay? Joke's on you. This is similar to that. This actual segment is about me. On December 27th, I came out with a tweet alleging that my ex-girlfriend, who had broken up with me over a Christmas trip, had sexual assaulted me through deception. I later, through therapy, realized that the situation is much more difficult because our relationship was hanging by a thread. And because I am a person with borderline personality disorder, even though I felt weird about the act, yes, I initiated. This was the second act of the night. The first act of the night was fine. Second act of the night, while I felt weird about it at some point when it progressed, I still continued because I genuinely loved the person and I thought that she loved me. I thought she was there to be with me. And I thought, as a person with BPD, that this would repair the relationship.
At least, you know, by working on intimacy.
Right? Yeah, by working on intimacy and connecting. This is the first time I've seen this person in person. Now, I want to be clear. I am not making the argument that people with BPD can't consent. I have seen some very idiotic people make that argument online. I don't even know how they came to it other than bad faith. There's no way. None. Mental illness does not rob you of your ability to consent at all times. It can in certain circumstances. For example, if someone's having a break from reality as a schizophrenic and you take advantage of them through that, that is assault. If you catch somebody when they're in the midst of a manic episode during bipolar and they do something they don't normally do, get into some gray areas. In my case, as a person with borderline personality disorder, because the relationship felt like it was hinged on the situation, and it was only during that act, because we had been together several hours before then, during that act, this person was very clear to say they loved me, they wanted me, etc. I was under the impression we were doing this as an act to be together and proceeded with it because I thought I had to for the relationship. The next day, this person then decided to tell me that she didn't love me, that her whole reason for coming to the hotel we had got in her town was because she decided that she wanted to use the weekend as a litmus test to see if she still had feelings for me because we had had a fight the day before we were supposed to leave for this trip. I want to be really clear. I had put out a personal statement talking about two issues. One of them involves the doggo. We will leave that part aside. That's for a different discussion, and I'm going to let ZZ run that one because fuck that kid. But the other part of that talked about what happened with my significant other, or now ex-significant other, No Flake. And what happened is that in that I had made a mistake and said that she had been enthusiastic about us coming. My memory was screwed up from what happened, and I worked this out with my therapist. The enthusiasm I was remembering was before the fight. About a week before the fight was what I was remembering. The actual act of us going out there required some discussion and ability to work together to try to work on the relationship. This happened through, well, I had to cancel clients that day and I was a mess. So ZZ spent the day talking to No, attempting to find some commonality, to find some way in which this could still work out. Screenshots from this discussion have been posted online and framed as coercion. I'm not going to use very aggressive language on that, but I will say that this is actively lying. There's also been active tendencies to use screenshots from my DMs with No to try to frame me as abusive. when really what they're doing is taking screenshots from when the initial breakup happened during a panic attack and trying to weaponize them as abuse. They also did this with our argument after, where she accused me of abuse, but couldn't actually tell me how other than you used your psychological knowledge on me, which sounds regurgitated as hell. This relationship, for me, was abusive, and I will explain how. One of my boundaries as a person with borderline is that I do not want to hear about your sexual activities with your other partners. I don't, because it will cause me harm. If I ask you, you had fun, the answer is yes or no, or maybe. That's a personal. During one of our conversations, my partner, while we were on the phone, told me about a circumstance in which the version of the story she told me at the time involved her two partners coercing her into letting them sleep together. And then when she got out to where they were at, they had a bad threesome where one person essentially froze up and dissociated, and another person, who was plural, may or may not have had a headmate that was consenting. But they stood, the two of them, one of them being no, considered to keep going. Like they just decided to keep going, despite all of this. I, after the initial trigger and me not being happy with my boundary being crossed, started having safety concerns, as did my partner, who I ran it through to ask, hey, am I overreacting to this? This issue became one of the core ones of the relationship because she would continually step on rakes and learn and end up in these circumstances where it was very clear that her knowledge of consent was garbage and that her ability to understand how to talk to a person with borderline, despite being given significant information.
And asked to also attend therapy herself so she would have resources.
She dicked off on the therapy part. And then she basically would only read the articles when I got her a text to voice. This continued throughout the relationship where things would be brought up in a way that were incredibly triggering. She would learn from it for a bit and then it would happen again. There was also a section of the relationship where for a month, there was supposed to be a mutual block between me and her partners. One of her partners lied and didn't do that. And I decided to try to engage, and that started to erode my mental illness, which, let's be clear, was already getting bad because of the trip she had gone on to Seattle earlier in November, because this is the first time I've had a partner travel, and it brought up a lot of fears because I've had partners die. And now...
Well, and I want to add that there was also a lot of implicit pressure in the relationship to engage with the other metamors. That was a big thing that was always kind of there, and even when people knew that there was this agreement that was supposed to be in place and that Poppy was doing something that was outside that agreement, and everyone should have known that something was going on, because again, the ask was, hey, I have borderline, I have a tendency to engage in things even if it's not the best for me due to feeling like I've got to be in the relationship. Okay, people should have known that and then didn't say anything and instead let the interactions continue.
Because the interactions continued, this started to erode my mental illness or my mental health. I eventually reached out to the person in question, gave her a letter, said, you need to block me. She still didn't. She apparently skimmed it or didn't give a crap. And eventually this came down to a question of me versus her. I couldn't hold to that boundary because BPD makes breaking up a pain. So instead, what I said was, you have two options. You could either continue relationships with both of us, knowing that the one with her will continue to negatively impact me, and that is a choice you can make, or you can choose to end that relationship. Now, we're going to come back to this in a second, but I want to be really clear. My understanding was she did. I found out later after the breakup that that might be in question, which means that there were several times during this where this person literally did psychic damage to me, or may have outright lied about a breakup about a harmful person that was negatively impacting my mental illness. So we're going to go through some screenshots, and we're going to try to do them as quickly as possible because all of that stuff from before is the preamble to explain this. Because rather than just front load you with the crap that happened to me, I want you to understand the underlying stuff first, and then I'm going to bring up the parts that involve me because I want to be very clear. Her and the dog and a bunch of other people are the reason I don't have a job right now. Because my abusive ex, i.e. my ex that I am alleging abused me, who knew full well about my boundaries from the beginning of the relationship, because we had a conversation about it online and then had another conversation when she first broke the boundary because she hung out with her fuck buddy and went into way too much detail. The thing I want you to understand is that one of the people that actively complained about me to my bosses was this person, my ex. And it's now because of her that I don't have a job, because I was forced to make an ultimate decision based on an ultimatum that was inherently unfair. The place I could have worked could have easily ignored these people. Why? Because any reviews they put in on Google would have been deleted immediately. They're not real. They weren't real clients, and their complaints could have just been ignored. But instead, my boss and the practice manager ended up getting their fucking tails between their legs and decided to not actually stand behind the trans woman that one of them had known for 2 decades. So we're going to go through this as chronologically accurate as I can. I'm not going to bring up every fucking screenshot I have because I have hundreds.
And I have a bunch on my end too, for that matter. We're
going to go through what we think is as important. Let's get started. The first thing I want to outline is this. This is this is actually the 27th, and this is from me processing what happened. This is, I think, this is later in the time. This is around the 27th. I just had a conversation with one of my close dear friends, our editor, by the way. As we were talking, and I was describing being used sexually, she basically compared it to something akin to assault. That should be say akin, not a can. I don't know if I agree with that, but the idea of being used just to see if someone still loves you does feel gross, and I do feel used and violated. I guess I'm going to have to figure out how I feel about that in therapy today. Yay, more trauma. So you can already see that my tweets were already going to cause problems with people because I was being super messy.
I'll give some data about Poppy too, because there is stuff that is consistent in all of her relationships. When Poppy's in a sexual relationship with somebody, she really, it is extraordinarily important that the person is doing the hell yeah rule, like we talked about earlier. All right, that they genuinely want to be there, that they want her, that this is this is a massive, intimate way to get to know somebody, that is known and respected and honored. And yes, these conversations absolutely came up previous to this situation. This stuff was present all throughout the relationship. These conversations were things that were directly had. So finding out that no, somebody's not actually doing that, despite knowing what your values and boundaries are, no, that fucks with you.
I love the 15-person uptick. Hi, people. I have a very strong suspicion who additionally joined.
Can I have the Red Bull?
Yeah. It's weird watching people interact with me around recent issues. They will interact, but avoid certain topics despite that being the elephant in the room. Despite there being an elephant in the room. It is weird how many people say they are progressive but stay silent about me being SA'd because they know my ex. This happened a lot. Let's cover consent. We already covered this, right? We talked about the Fry's model. This was before I realized my mental illness was a factor. But let's go over this first argument. In my current situation with my ex, no flake, the area where my consent was violated is the I, or the informed part of consent. I was under the impression that we were being intimate as a means to finally be together after 4 months of waiting, and because we were both heavily attracted to one another. In short, I thought it was an act of love and lust. However, the next day when she walked out, she informed me that she had been there and everything she had done was to test to see if she still loved me. The reality is that had I known that my ex was using sex as a litmus test for her feelings, I never would have consented. Yeah, I was super excited for that weekend. I was devastated when it got canceled. Mm-hmm. I want to be very clear that I was and still am profoundly in love with this girl. She's now framing it because she can't do anything but backpedal and talk shit about me being obsessive. This was never the case. She was an FP, and she was somebody that I genuinely wanted to live with me. I genuinely wanted her in my life. In fact, when she was deciding where to move to in the future, it was between me and her other partner. In fact, just to rub in the salt in the wound, when the actual official breakup happened on the 23rd after the assault, she specifically made it clear that she had chosen the other partner as just a little dig. But notice that this situation, even before we talk about the mental illness, violates the informed piece. I was not informed of what was actually happening. I was not necessarily enthusiastic at some point.
The reversible is probably another big one too.
Yep.
The thing with borderline is that you are dealing with somebody who, when a breakup happens, that is existential dread, that is terror, right? That is losing an entire fucking part of yourself. And that is just how your brain is wired. That's just how that is. It doesn't matter how much therapy you do. It doesn't matter how much treatment you try and get. Your brain is wired differently to do different things. And so this is why there was so many fucking articles given to her. But like the thing is that if you're gonna be in a relationship with somebody with mental illness and they go through the fucking effort of telling you so much fucking about it, no, do your goddamn fucking research, actually fucking look into things and actually take that shit into account. Because otherwise you end up in a situation where the person that you are trying to be intimate with isn't gonna feel like they can actually say no. Okay, and I've been with Poppy for years, and I still reassure her that it is okay for her to not want sex when I do. That is still a thing because it still comes up in her brain as, oh shit, it's like I'm somehow failing my partner or I'm going to lose them or something of that nature. That still happens.
And also, just to validate my partner Sage, there was a time with No where I had bought her a brand new webcam similar to the one we have, the 4K webcam we have, bought her blankets in order to seal off the part of her living room so she could have privacy, so we could have intimate time during video calls. The reason I'm bringing this up is that during one of those calls, she had been somewhat reticent about the call, and I mistook that as being reticent for the act of being sexual together. And I freaked the fuck out because I thought she only complied because she wasn't interested, when that was not the case. Even instinctively, I knew that getting someone to do something online still could be technically coercive. This is the thing. There are people arguing that that's not the case, and it's nonsense. So again, watch Sage's video. Now we're going to get into some takes. There are going to be some takes. This is the dumb crap that happened after I came out with my assault allegation. So this person, Trans Kafka, Mix Melina, this person I've recently apologized to. They've also apologized to me. This was before that, so not going to give her shit. But this was the leader of a group of people that want to cancel me. Most of them are on Tumblr. Some of them are on Twitter. Anyone who suddenly has an issue with me often got weaponized, whether it was the doggo or whoever. If you were paying attention to Poppy's tweets at the time, you know that she got blocked by No right beforehand. Yeah, this happened when we were literally together. PZ had to negotiate to make the trip happen, not No. That's true, we did. Poppy's pain is real and valid, but it's not evidence or anything but her emotions. Okay, but if you show signs of trauma, then it stands to reason there's trauma. Do you remember the stuff we looked at earlier where the definition of assault can be very wibbly wobbly, but the effects aren't? There's a reason why I brought that up, because this Heather, Mystic Heather, crying into the abyss, wonderful human being, gorgeous human being, love her to death. So it's even worse than Poppy said. Usually if I'm to the point of blocking, then I don't invite them to my house for sex. That's just me though. I don't know how pointing out clearly immature behavior on No's part helps your argument that what she did was fucked up. Like, sexual assault allegations aside, No invited two people she clearly didn't like over for sex around Christmas. And by the way, this was both of us, because before the breakup on that Thursday, guess what? There was discussion thrown around about the possibility of a threesome. So ZZ was in play with this, and that was half joking, half not. I know, because I can find the fucking screenshots in the group discussion. The one that she no longer has access to because she left the group. Like, that shitty behavior in and of itself. This is the thing that's really funny. The people that are defending No are the same people who refuse to acknowledge that even if they want to somehow gaslight me on my assault, the action of inviting us there and then just casting me aside the next day because me and ZZ were having fights is nonsense. This is child behavior. Let's move on. I even told them both ahead of time that there was only a tiny chance things could be fixed. Looking at it, she went back and forth on this, and even when she was at work that night, she was more hopeful than this. Now, granted, was it ecstatic like I originally reported? No, because I, as an idiot, did not remember things properly.
Well, and I gotta be clear, my conversations with her were very clear of,
this is your choice.
This is your choice. Are you sure you want to do this? I checked in with her again when she woke up later to say, hey, are you sure? Like, this is still your choice. Like, because again, she had originally broken up during a fight, which was really fucking awful. And it was hard to tell, okay, is this something done out of anger or is this something that you're genuinely feeling, like, long term? Like, showing up, she knew, was going to involve trying to work on the relationship. She knew that.
This was discussed. So Poppy initiated the sex without any form of my consent and performed sexual acts on me forcefully before the night without asking. The sex had nothing to do with anything. So I want you to note this, because what she's essentially alleging is that this is assault. Despite her showing no symptoms whatsoever, every report I've heard from around her has said that she's fine. But again, even ignoring that, one, There were 2 sexual interactions. One of them was us making out, her unsnapping her leotard after raising her skirt, and me performing fellatio, to which she was enthusiastic and held my head down. I generally take that as a positive. The second act was one where I initiated. We started with kissing, and it proceeded from there. Both of us were engaged in these acts. Both of us had, at the time, at least from the beginning of the second act, there wasn't a problem. It became a problem when it started escalating, and I started shutting down internally. I don't understand what the last sentence is. The sex had nothing to do with anything. Is just, it's a meaningless statement. I don't even know what it means. But again, she's trying to make this allegation. Don't worry, we're going to come back to this when Twisty proves that she was full of shit. But let's keep going through bad take hell. I didn't say that at all. You didn't read it. It was both in the same night. The first time she forced herself on me was the first instance of Zizi walked in the bathroom of the hotel. Here, I fucking highlighted it for you. Stop trying to gaslight me personally. Thanks. Did you just not read what I posted? The daytime is before the night. So she's trying to argue some weird thing. Again, her response to my allegations was to create her own allegations and just sort of throw them out there. There was no mention of this beforehand. Yeah, she says forcefully, but now denies it. Like, why would you even that last sentence? Like, again, it doesn't. And then try to tell people she didn't allege sexual assault, even though that's exactly what she was trying to allege. Based Twisty. With peace and love, you're either stupid or lying. Rape equals non-consensually initiated sex. I'm glad you agree with me as well. What she did was initiate without consent. So you're accusing her of rape. She would not actually say this. She would not actually acknowledge that it was an accusation. She just kept making it flippantly through these like sideways ways. You can go find this thread. It's on Naomi Chance's board. The entire dogpile squad was sent out with instructions to copy paste the list and some other stuff to harass as many people as they can with it. No. I will grab the screenshots if I need to, but I'm not going to at the moment. If I have to show them on stream at some point, I will put them on camera and have the editor put them in. What the request was, this person assaulted me. If you wish to continue interacting with me, please block them. I never said harass. In fact, I directly said, do not harass. This is inappropriate. And specifically said, block.
People need to start understanding the fucking difference between defensive and offensive actions. Like, seriously, blocking and ignoring somebody and not engaging with them is a defensive one.
So okay? This is all lies right here. If you see someone say that I brought out the harassment squad, what they're saying is I asked people to block someone because I didn't feel safe having mutuals with the girl that sexually assaulted me. Now come back to that perfect victim thing, because that's going to be something that comes into this. One of the reasons, never once could I figure out why people didn't believe me, and then I figured it out. It's because I'm not the perfect victim. I'm a 6-foot trans woman who dated a 5'8" trans woman, and she's an uwu small bean sex worker, and I'm a loudmouth, politically savvy woman on the internet. So what did they do? Focus on me as the problem and use this to jump off of their their previous issues with me, whether it was the bimbo politics stuff or them misunderstanding the law review
article. Yeah.
So let's continue, because I want to get through all this and go to sleep at some point. The only part of this I'm even involved in is that she's obsessed with me. The number of messages between us from late August to late December on Discord was 63,108. I know because I had a downloading program compile all of it. 63,108. I'm pretty sure the obsession went both ways, because there are hundreds of instances of her either sexting me, sending me nudes, or just telling me she loved me. But I'm the obsessed one.
And I'm going to be honest, I have DMs with her because she would get stressed, and not take personal space or not take personal time. And she would refuse to actually say anything to Poppy of, hey, I'm going to be away for a while. She would refuse to ever fucking take space and actually say that directly. This happened a lot. And so it got Poppy pinned down for, oh, Poppy's doing something bad, when really, like, how are you supposed to know what somebody needs or wants over the internet if they don't tell you? Like, you can't intuit every goddamn fucking thing.
Yep. By the way, the people in YouTube chat who said, you said block, I never engaged with no once. Yeah, she received no harassment as far as I can find. I've had multiple accounts, mine and others, go over her stuff since December. She has received no harassment that I can find. If she did, and it's from our community, I will, in fact, ban them from everything. No one is to harass this woman. But we move on. I still question why or how an ace person would trick anyone into sex. I don't even have sexual needs or wants. Do you remember how I said that ace people can still engage in sexual things and how an ace person can still cross consent? This was legitimately one of her dumbass arguments. So first off, throughout the relationship, she never identified as ace. It was something she questioned occasionally because she had a low sex drive. My argument was her estrogen was too high because before she started taking HRT, her sex drive was much higher. My guess was that she had it too high because the place she gets it from, kind of lame.
Well,
So
and one of the frequent issues that we have with a lot of trans women is that if you are not going through the best professionals or going through good professionals, sometimes people miss something and don't get their hormones tested often enough.
she then later came out. I don't have the screenshot, sadly, because because we're mutually blocked. But she later came out and said she was gray ace, which actually completely invalidates this because gray ace people sometimes experience sexual needs and wants and sometimes experience sexual attraction. Now we're going to come back to this because I have definitive proof that she, in fact, did have sexual attraction towards me. Not because I'm trying to prove I'm so hot, but because this is a lie. Ace is traditionally defined on most websites as a person who does not experience sexual attraction. Some websites, including YouTube, or not YouTube, but Wikipedia, describe this as also not having sexual needs or wants. But I only found a couple places that did that, and the Wikipedia article sources people's books who I have no idea their actual credentials. We'll get back to that. Moving on. They begged and guilt-tripped me to come down to the hotel they already paid for. Poppy was, so I don't know what she means by this, because if you're talking about before the trip, no, we showed those screenshots. That's not what happened. You can even go look at Faye Rin, the silly lady who decided to, through a mutual meeting of a girl named Athena on Twitter, had us meet and then proceeded to to jump me and yell at me and tell me I was the actual abuser the whole time, right? Like utter nonsense. And then tried to take very cherry-picked screenshots to prove that I was this terrible person. In fact, that thread was what prompted a certain fish to make theirs. It was very stupid. Poppy was fully aware I didn't want to be with her anymore ahead of that. That's not what you said. You weren't sure. ZZ guilt-tripped me into giving it one last chance. That's not what she said, or they said. In fact, what they said was it was your choice. We have the direct quote. Sex was never on the table or desired with either of them. This isn't true. Just not.
Yeah, if we've got to put my screenshots from my DMs, I will.
Yeah, if we need to grab those for a future follow-up segment, we will. I'm just trying to get through the main story. I hate that woman, Faye Rin. No, Faye Rin is an abusive. I'm just going to say it. Bleep this out, but cunt. She's also part of those people that consider themselves ironic betalists who are weirdly okay with going after trans men. I'm going to be really honest. I'm kind of glad I got blocked by that whole crew because they're all absolutely toxic. They have no concept of trans solidarity. It is literally just whining. I have no tolerance for it. But again, sex was never on the table is not true. In fact, there were so many conversations. In fact, certain sex toys were bought for this trip, including a lesbian flag dildo that was specifically sized to be able to be used in a certain way. So, whatever. I left because of their arguing and toxic personalities. We were arguing because you kept being weird.
Oh, yeah, no, she was flip-flopping how she interacted with
each headmate, and then also interacted really weird with
me, too, yeah. The whole thing was massively uncomfortable. Like, this was supposed to be a holiday trip in which me and one of the younger headmates had especially planned, a gift of making, of decorating, like, a cooking apron for her.
So this whole supporting each other through the whole trip was not true. We were in the middle of a fight. In fact, I upset ZZ because I chose to sleep with No that night.
Because Poppy was feeling like that was
neat. I had
she had to do it. Like, that was the last chance ever.
This eye was trapped. She was never trapped. She had a key card. She could have gotten out. She could have left. No one was holding her ransom. No one was handcuffing her to the bed. She easily could have left. This idea that we ganged up on her. In fact, several times I defended her, even when ZZ was mad or vice versa. This is just not true.
No, the most that she got out of me during a lot of that stuff was, hey, no, we actually want you to work on this shit. We actually wanted you to, like, show up and actually talk things out, not just run. Like, so that's what we wanted. No.
So this happened a little bit later. Twisty asserts, Poppy took far more safety measures than No did, which was true. She left me unblocked, both on Google Voice and Discord, for up to a month, even though I had her blocked. Now, was Google Voice blocked on my end? No, because I would occasionally send a very weak-willed text saying, I miss you, I love you, etc. Sometimes they would be angry because she would do something that was, once again, a new bottom of the barrel. No, she didn't. Yes, she did. You didn't even try. All you did was block her on Twitter, which is basically an effective safety measure in comparison, which is barely an effective safety measure in comparison to other platforms like Discord. No, she didn't. She didn't block me or anything by Twitter. Yeah, I did. She kept trying to reach out. She kept looking at my page. No, I didn't. I haven't been able to look at your page. I'm blocked on all 4 accounts. She's just lying to all of you and you believe it. Can you prove that? Can you show how I was on your page? Because I've clicked on your name in various posts and I'm still blocked. She hasn't done anything but stalk and harass me since the start, but somehow that's victim behavior. No, I haven't stalked her once. In fact, I know where she lives. I don't go there. I would never go there. She's probably a trigger at this point. And to be honest, the harassing when like what?
Yeah, I'm going to be
tagging
honest.
her for the thing that she did to me that she can just block me over, sending a hate mob in the form of Faye Rin and the Betalist squad, then weaponizing a part of the online left, including an ex-friend of mine who decided to get butthurt because they didn't understand a Transpanic article.
Or how the Transpanic offense was not used in the article.
I remember how you said you want to be blocked by my partner because of the mental self-harm. Yeah. Because because your partner argued that rape by deception isn't a thing, even though it is a thing. She was just listening to Fesh. 2 desperate text messages isn't stalking, which is true. I sent 2 desperate text messages. She absolutely did block you on Twitter and Discord. Hell, she had to fight the urge to unblock you on there because of her irrational attachment she has to you. She can't even distance yourself from her for her own safety. You can't even distance yourself from her for your own safety. She didn't do any of that. Yes, I did. I just want to live my life free of her nightmare. What nightmare? So leave me alone. Tell her to get off my feed. I'm not on your feed, and leave me alone. I can't be on your feed. We're mutually blocked. I just want to get away. I just want her to get away from me like I did at the start. That's not what you said at the start. I have multiple discussions where you said you wanted to be friends and really wanted to stay connected. I know at least one person I spoke about had it 100% considered adding to be harassment. People think adding is harassment. I'm going to be really clear. They're children. You can just click on it and like literally mute the thing, so there's no...
Wasn't your account on private half the time anyway?
Several of them were,
like,
too. There's no way she could have seen it. Like, there was no way she could have seen some of the accounts because they were on private. The nightmare is the consequences of my actions. True, Beard Panda. I still question, so this happened late January, I still question why or how an ace person would trick anyone into sex. I don't even have a sexual wants or needs. Again, she has no idea what actual asexuality is. It refers to not having attraction, not sex drive. She only found one version of this, and it was from 3 books that were used as sources on Wikipedia.
And even the Wikipedia article later goes on to explain better about sex drive and all of that.
We'll cover that in a moment. That has to do with her HRT being too high. She directly states in multiple DMs that she's attracted to me, thus she is not asexual, right? And then this is her responding to somebody else. This is a particular person saying, look at this. This is objectively Poppy being an abuser. You used your therapeutic knowledge to belittle me and break my boundaries constantly. I have no reason to show up. I had asked her to show up and actually like work things out with me.
Show up in the emotional, like mentally present sense of being willing to work stuff. Yeah.
Sherlock Smug, we are talking about rape culture and talking about my sexual assault, my alleged sexual assault that happened back in December.
Also, I gotta be clear. Like, her knowledge of any kind of terminology is
borked. No, she has no education. None.
Like, the thing that we kept having to do was sending her articles detailing what things were, just to even have basic conversations. Like, that is not using mental health knowledge against somebody.
So this is me responding. This is when we had an argument during that morning. Not at all. And the fact that you're saying that right now is disgusting. You have every reason to show up because it's the right thing to do. When I say show up, what I mean is work through this and actually stand courageously in the regards of the situation, not run from your frickin' consequences. She provides no way in which my therapeutic knowledge was used to belittle her or break her boundaries. In fact, the only boundary that she could ever cite that I broke, supposedly, was the discussion around future living habits, because She told me that was between her and another partner and then wanted the conversation to drop. And the problem was I have borderline and it would bring up anxiety, panic attacks, and a lot of fear. And so I would ask for reassurance or ask, when do you think you're going to have an answer or a discussion? And she would say, it feels too early. And I'm like, that's fine. It still was something that weighed on the relationship. It also came from another time where she broke a boundary of mine, where she said something really cruel. I was sharing, BPD people sometimes fantasize a lot about future possibilities with a person. Sometimes I'll look at a random stranger and think about like what it would be like living with them, right? These are all just fantasies. Well, I brought some of these fantasies up to her and she made this statement saying, well, sometimes fantasies don't come true. Tee-hee. And I went, well, what do you mean by that? And suddenly I became aware of the fact that there had been discussions between her and her other partner about the possibility of them living together. And I became upset as a BPD person because I felt somehow I'd come into a situation where I was suddenly out of the running for this. And if that was the case, why would I stay?
Well, because your relationship could only progress so much. It couldn't really progress all the way kind of thing.
Yeah, I want a queer family. I want people to live with and share life with and build a home with. Partners who live on the other side of the country are not an interest.
Or at least not in any like major serious way like this one was.
I'm not going to give this person any play, but this is the person that tried to dox me. They failed, but yeah. And I'm using they as a general because I don't want to give your identity away, not because I'm trying to misgender you, so please shut up. This person, by the way, tried to gaslight both Sage and me about our borderline, and then tried to claim that female borderline is apparently narcissism, except the person they cited is HD Tutor, a person who says they're a professional but doesn't say what kind, and is obsessed with everything being narcissism. I want to be clear from the DSM perspective. Oh yeah, they got really weird about plurality, and this person also got very weird about asexuality way at the beginning of the channel, but let's leave that be. Oh yeah, Sage went over that and showed how this person basically tried to ignore their plurality and claimed that I had diagnosed them. Let me be clear. If you're not a client, I actually can't diagnose you. Diagnosis is a construct used to describe your symptoms and is a code I send into insurance. So if you're not my client and you haven't signed an outpatient agreement,
can't be diagnosed.
Yeah. Basically, one of the things I supposedly did bad was that I tried to supposedly diagnose my partner, when in fact what I said was, you have similar symptoms to me, you should talk to your therapist about that. And I offered to let her do some inventories.
And then take those inventories to said therapist.
And then she lied and said that this was me trying to force this thing on her, when all I said was, this seems like a thing. You seem like you deal with similar stuff to me. Maybe that's a consideration. That's not me diagnosing. That's just me hearing a thing and going, that sounds familiar. But according to her, she decided to weaponize that, which was really weird.
I think it was even more from her direction, too, of going, oh, Poppy's telling me about borderline. Oh, I relate to this.
I also want to be really clear. There's a screenshot I have floating around somewhere where she directly says, you know what? If I do have this, then you and my other partner, the one that she was going to live with, are FPs. And there are many examples of her using this language about herself. Now, granted, that's not a formal diagnosis, and I'm not diagnosing anybody. But then she says here, exactly right, she's a massive narcissist. But here's the thing. I don't show any signs of NPD. None. I just don't. I've been assessed for it. I don't. I'm borderline. There are people whose traits can overlap. Mine don't. Sorry. It's really weird that I get accused of supposedly diagnosing when all I did was make a statement, but this is her diagnosing me. Because I'm not taking this bullshit of this is the colloquial definition of narcissism.
We're not. Talking when you are saying NPD with all the fucking letters.
She's not even saying NPD. The thing is, this person's saying NPD. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
What she's saying is massive narcissist. So this could be the colloquial version. But the difference here, and this is the important part, is this video is talking about NPD versus BPD. She's agreeing. The thing about BPD is, unlike other cluster B disorders, it's very, very treatable. That's arguable. It is very treatable in one sense, but for a long time they were looked at as problem cases. I have an entire study that shows the ways that we are misaligned and mistreated as a marginalized group in mental health.
Well, and treatable in the sense of you can learn to work with yourself, learn to deal with your symptoms, but this is still something that is a lifelong disorder. You will always have this.
Yep.
This will always be something that you are struggling with.
So this person, who I also blocked out because I don't know who they are. They claim they've talked to me. I have no idea.
Yeah, this is where shit got weird with people trying to like
Make up
shit.
Conversations we've had. If I have talked to them, I don't remember. And if I don't think I did. But what they say here is utter nonsense. The thing about BPD is, unlike other cluster B disorders, it's very, very treatable. Again, depends on the opinion. Poppy told me she tried DBT and CBT and that it didn't work, which is a huge red flag that she's not actually BPD. She's probably NPD. I've never done DBT as a client. DBT stands for dialectical behavior therapy. I have used it in sessions. I have never had it. So I know this is a lie. I've also had CBT before, because cognitive behavioral therapy is one of the first things most people start with, and it's traditionally not used with borderline because it can only help to some degree. So again, this person is lying and say I said this, and then saying, oh, she probably has NPD, which is another person diagnosing me. Do you see how these people get away with their lack of expertise to just say whatever they want against a person who is alleging assault? Here's another person saying this. It's really fucked up that ZNP are now releasing someone's full name, considering that's what happened to Poppy when she called it doxing. Zena has my full name and address. Am I even safe? So one, we have tons of people's addresses. I'm going to be really clear. Haven't released any of them. Why? Because I have fucking standards. Two, we didn't release someone's full name. We released their preferred name. I have Haley's legal name. I haven't said it because I don't want to dead name her and because I'm not a cunt. She tries to claim it's meaningless to dox me, but I literally have legal documents in the name she's spreading around. She literally doxed me all over the place in such an obvious way that a legal case against her would be a slam dunk. I've spoken to lawyers. This is not the case, but go off.
And we know because people have already tried to dox us.
The definition of doxing is very specific. Saying someone's preferred name is not that. Also, I want to be really clear. She's not a lawyer. The only place I could find online that uses this name and not No Flake was her Facebook, where she has her location and her page fully public.
That was only found out after.
Yeah, I have screenshots talking to our former mod Kira going, by the way, did you know that her Facebook shows this? Me going, no, I did not. That sucks. But again, I can't be held responsible for something I'm not aware of. And I certainly can't be held responsible for someone not, as a trans woman, properly privating.
Also, it's illegal to have documents in the wrong name.
Mm-hmm. So again, basically, I think the documents that are probably being talked about here are, careful, Poppy, she might say she's still doxing. Yeah, whatever. She can say that. Again, lots of people are named Haley. So these are some of the bad take bears that happen. And as you can see, people have been incredibly dishonest. And some of these people were former fans because a certain person has gone back and forth. And in the case of one of them was a friend for over 2 years who I had a ton of respect for until they misread an article and then decided to get mad, throw down a boundary as a weapon, and then weaponize it harder. Bad take bear needs to be an emote. Someone draw me a bad take bear. Moving on. By the way, if you like the stream, like the video. Also, donate. Consider donating. You can do so on the website. You can do so through super chats, or you can become a patron on Patreon. Please support us. I got fired because of all this.
And it helps us pay our editor too, so we can actually do things.
Yup. All right. Chapter 3. We're going to cover some of her dumb arguments because I think they're very dumb. So one of her arguments was that as an asexual person, she couldn't commit assault. This is a weird flex. So look at this. She says she used this first part. Asexuality is a lack of sexual attraction to others or low absence of interest or desire for sexual activity, according to these 3 books. What's interesting, later in it, they say asexuality is a lack of sexual attraction or just That's what we just talked about, right? Sub-identities. But the difference is, and this is where it gets wild, certain asexuals may participate in sexual activity out of curiosity. Some may also masturbate as a form of solitary release, while others may not feel the need to do so. I know for a fact that she falls in the former camp, who often dissociate it from sexual attraction and being asexual. Asexuals who masturbate generally consider it to be a normal product of the human body rather than a sign of latent sexuality, and others do not find it pleasurable. Some asexual men are unable to get an erection and are unable to attempt penetration. Asexuals also differ in their views of performing sex acts. Some are indifferent. Some may engage in sexual activity for the benefit of the romantic partner, while others may be strongly adverse to the idea, though They are not typically against sex as a whole, right? These are the three sources. Sexuality Today, The Human Perspective by McGraw-Hill. So this is a textbook showing a low interest in sex. Again, it would depend on the type of ACE. We then have The Psychology of Sex and Dating by Helm. And then Crooks has Our Sexuality, which is a book I own. Again, while some of these are textbooks, some of them are novels, they don't actually show the whole picture. Yeah, one of the sources from 2004. Let's talk about this argument. So this article makes the argument about the fact that sex abuse and sexual assault are about power. It tries to make, check the more tab, I usually fix it that way. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why it's not letting me click on anything. It's actually being really weird. We're not going to cover this super in depth, but basically the issue is yes, most assault, yeah, poor designed website. So again, far away, most sexual assaults and sexual violence are perpetrated by men and typically arise with asymmetrical power dynamics, right? So the problem is that this is a fairly solid argument. Again, it's about power, but sex is the weapon. And that's what this other article goes on to talk about. So the other article, if I can get it to load at some point, basically goes into this argument about the idea that rape is about power, but it's also kind of about sex. Now, the thing I want you to take into consideration with this whole thing is just understanding at a core level that when someone commits these things, there's a lot of factors that go into it. And so the idea that a person in some way, shape, or form, the idea that a person who is ace could not commit these acts is utterly nonsensical, because if they're not sex repulsed, they entirely could use sex as a weapon. Because it may not be about sexual gratification. It might be about having power over the other person, or it might be about using something against the other person that they may hold dear. Again, this is the stuff that we're dealing with. And I want to be really clear about it, because there's a way in which, like, one of the things that's really important to take from this is, and what I like about this article, and I'll post these elsewhere so you guys can find them. But the issue that's really interesting is, so again, we talked about this in the 70s, it was largely considered to be an issue of power. What this notion did well was promote the cause of social justice and gender equality. What it poorly did was explain rape. Advocacy, of course, need not rely on science so long as it's solely focused on values. I may value gender equality and champion it without needing scientific approval of my stance. One's values are subjective, requiring no proof of evidence, and are beholden to no empirical facts. Though it'd be nice if they were. But advocacy runs into trouble when it tries to claim the medal of truth. If, for example, I advocate a position that rape is not about sex, I am making a claim of truth, not of values. Even if I'm doing so in service of my values, discerning truth requires us to referee competing claims based on evidence. And for that, we only have science. Viewed dispassionately, the rape is about power, not sex claim appears problematic on its face. First, human behavior is multiply determined. Meaningful human events have more than one reason and are shaped by more than a single motive or force. Rape is a human event. It is motivated by more than one thing. Second, to the claim that sex, one of the most powerful motives our species' existence depends on it, after all, is somehow adjacent from an act that routinely involves erections, vaginal penetration, and ejaculation, defies reason. Arguing that rape is not about sex is akin to asserting that gun violence is not about guns. Both betray an incomplete and politicized view. So again, current scholarships on rape further undermine the rapist power narrative. For example, Richard Felsen, professor of sociology and criminology at Penn State, and Richard Moran of Mount Holyoke College provide statistics showing that most rape victims are young women. Youth, of course, is strongly linked in the scientific literature to sexual attractiveness. One could counter that young women are targeted because they're vulnerable, naive, and easy targets, but elderly women and children make even easier targets, yet they are not raped at the same higher rates. Moreover, when cases of robbery where control and power goals have already been satisfied end in rape, the victims are mostly young women. The evidence is substantial, and it leads to a simple conclusion. Most rapists force victims to have sex because they want sex. Right? And so again, the power is a factor. It's not the only factor. Does that make sense? Are you guys, is this tracking? We move on. No, being ace does not stop you from being someone who commits assault. I'm sorry. Thank you for playing. You did not win the prize. This one's just a personal bitch of mine. So there was a fairly aggressive argument in which No decided to be incredibly toxic to both me and ZZ. ZZ got really upset and kind of got abrasive too. Not saying it was PMDD. Stuff happens. But later that night, we were supposed to be taking an 8-hour break from each other. No messages, no nothing. Just silence. And neither of us could do it because we both just couldn't. So at 3:38 a.m., I got this message. I can't listen to the messages because I sent some voice messages. I just want you to know that, but I'm going to do it. Just be easy on me. Be nice to her after. I don't want to hear about her again after this. She's still a friend. This isn't to start a fight, but if it's going to be done, it needs to be done, okay? I will also do my absolute best to never mention her again to try and help that situation, but a decision was wanted and a decision is made. You and me is the decision. Now you're probably asking, Puppy, why aren't you showing this on stream? Because a certain person decided to report Sage's stream for showing DMs. So I will read them to you. I will not show them to you. I will, however, put them all in a folder for you so that you may peruse them at your leisure. Because I am not going to be told that I am not providing evidence. I just want you to be aware of the facts. So that was from Discord discussion. Then this happened. Here is a screenshot of the day we broke up. For some reason, I could see her partner, despite us having a mutual block. She quote tweeted her, and it was one of those crossword puzzles that's filled with sexual stuff. And it had the words pizza, strap on. And she said, well, I think a party's here happening. One of the agreements she had made, Penny, not myself, but Penny, was that she wouldn't engage in RP or sexual acts of any kind with her ex because we didn't want crosses of boundaries. We wanted things to be very clear. They were broken up. When we brought this to her, along with her not holding to a boundary about telling us what was going on beforehand, we had asked to be notified if she needed space. She didn't tell us she was spending time with a partner, and that had been our request to let us know so we would leave, we would fuck off. This counted because literally she's talking about a strap-on with her ex-girlfriend. So we got upset, noticeably so. And then this happened. This is Trans Kafka, Mixed Melina, saying, Trans Persian, these two are so cute together, and it's so nice to see them celebrating such a wholesome milestone. Congrats, you two. Again, we've talked about this. We're okay. Screaming because it's been 1 year anniversary of me and Noel Flake getting together. Happy screams. This was in January. How could they have a year anniversary if they broke up? Either they're really flippant about that month, or they never broke up. At best, this makes her look weak. At worst, it makes her look like a liar. And it bothers me because this is something, and a person, yeah, it's cheating. It's actively cheating. If she was still engaging with her in any way, shape, or form, it is cheating. Beyond just basic level friendship, because the reason she didn't want to end that friendship was not because of her, but because they shared communities and she didn't want to be kicked out because she was afraid of being abandoned. So again, that's weird, but let's leave that alone for right now. Next, we're getting through these quickly. So these are just some fun things to point out. These are not DMs. These are in my server. So she no one can report them. Except me, because it's my private server. These are all things I gave when you don't fit the classic definition of borderline, because she had asked for resources about a particular subtype of BPD called quiet BPD. So I provided sources. You can see here, I said, hey, did you see these? I said, how do you know if you have this? 25 embarrassing symptoms of borderline personality. These are all from the Mighty. I think the Mighty's really good about this stuff because they're usually pretty solid. Here's me, offering hugs. I don't even know plans myself, still figuring that out. I absolutely don't rank my partners. I would never abandon you from a little distance. I didn't mean to leave you hanging. I panicked and Zena came and got me. I don't know what the future holds either. BPD tends to create fantasies in my head about possible futures. I don't talk about them a lot because they are usually too far flung in the future or they scare people off. I love you too, a lot, a lot, a lot. Notice, I love you, but I'm the obsessed one. Night, Patchy.
Night.
Like a lot. It doesn't just feel like new relationship energy or BPD. And again, me talking about how important she was to me. Like, again, this is her understanding BPD. Yeah, being poly doesn't mean you can't cheat, and it doesn't make it any less excusable. Here's me sharing infographics with her, including one of all the statistics, various things about borderline, including if you look down at the bottom, the criteria from the DSM-5. Here's more of them. I hope I didn't do anything wrong here. This is back in October. I've been listening when you talk about your BPD. You didn't do anything wrong. I scared myself. Did you read the above? I did, yes. Above pick? Okay. More stuff. Again. And then just as a coup de grace, she says that she was never told the boundaries. As of 12/4, I came up with new boundaries. This was after the Amy incident, her partner. Do not bring up partners without a green light. Do not. So green light in this case is ask first before you do so, because at this point, these people were so unsafe that they were triggering. Do not threaten me or assume I want to change Haley's poly status in any way. So this was in regards to her headmate. I won't get into that because apparently I'm supposedly outed her as plural. Didn't know it was a secret, but here we are. Do not try for any type of integration, bare minimum 6 to 9 months. In this case, integration means between me and her metamors because I looked at them as unsafe. I didn't want them around my partners because they seemed unsafe.
Oh, I think they're absolutely unsafe from my DMs with her too. Fairly so.
Oh, yeah. Now we get into the fun ones. Here is Dear Twisty and this person. I don't think Poppy's an abuser. That's a stupid take. I just think both parties involved did shit I find wildly inappropriate, especially No's response. I wouldn't even fuck you as a defense against claims, which it is all I knew. For the record, I never said that. Oh, yes, you did. Then can you prove it? Yes. I'm not sure you want me to do that because you can't. None of you actually read what I said. I still question how an ace person can trick anyone into sex. I don't even have sexual needs or wants. That's not what that says. Are you stupid? By the way, if I wanted to be super lib, I could be like, Twisty's a black trans woman. In the id poll politics, doesn't she win? Just saying. So we go on. You literally implied that ace people don't commit sexual assault and also implied that sexual assault is about sex, which is also false, both false belief. You can pass this on to Poppy. Shouldn't she be aware that she's actively spreading lies about LGBTQ people? And no, a lot of you claimed that I wanted some form of power over her and wanted sex with her, but both of these are impossible. They're not. She had rare sexual attraction and rare sexual desire. That doesn't mean she didn't have it at all.
Power dynamics are a big topic.
And the asexuality thing she took was from Wikipedia, no other sources. Nor did she look at their sources.
And again, the Wikipedia article goes on to actually explain things better than what she understood just from that little tiny clip of the first sentence.
So she initiated every sex act and touch. She pushed for sex despite me wanting to sleep. That's literally not what happened. I have no sex drive or desire in line with being ace, just as it's been the case for years now. There are several conversations in our DMs, all 63,000 messages showing that that's not the case. You accused her of rape, right? I never claimed she raped me. I have no desire or drive for sex, but I'm typically willing to do things my partners are when they want to make them happy. It doesn't bother me in any way. I don't pressure anyone for sex and never have in my life. It wouldn't make sense to do so. You're defining rape without using the word. If that's what she did, just say it. You're in a safe environment. Heart. I'm not, because that's not what I'm saying. Asexual people are still entirely capable of having sex with partners despite no drive. It's just more often than not driven out of a desire to please their partner. She initiated sex and intimacy. I went with it to make her happy. You said she initiated without your consent, and you told her no, right?
And her going, no. I could say there was an implied consent from me. I never once said I wanted it, despite her telling me she wanted me several times. Enjoying it isn't really applicable to me either, but she claimed it was fun and only voiced her enjoyment the entire time.
She literally moaned and pushed down my head in the midst of fellatio. I can name you in order of operations of what happened. This is her lying, especially if I decide to bring out certain screenshots. If your story is that you willingly reciprocated, then there's no point in bringing up the fact that she made the first move. There is actually, because you all trying to claim somehow that I had power in the moment, despite not wanting it, initiating it, or getting sexual enjoyment from it. That doesn't mean you weren't capable of assault, you dummy. I just did what she wanted. She's the one that had, but then you escalated in the second act. I just didn't voice my concerns because I was afraid it would end the relationship. It does not matter who made the first move in any scenario when it comes to SA. It matters when boundaries are broken, who consented or rescinded consent, when who said what and who did what, etc. The first move on its own is meaningless. Nobody rescinded consent. No boundaries were broken. I can constantly ask if things were okay, if things were felt good, if my partner wants to stop. She had full control of everything. She never rescinded consent because to do so might destroy the relationship. Girl, you left out a lot of your story then. Why would you say that she made the first move while you were trying to sleep and then proceed to leave out the important details? You implied that you didn't want it and she broke boundaries. Now you're saying everything was peachy. Why wasn't that your initial defense? It's so easy to say Poppy is wrong. We had a good time. Everything was chill, blah, blah, blah. Because I literally want nothing to do with the woman who tried to ruin my other relationships, manipulate the fuck out of me, and put me through an extreme mental stress for months. I don't want anything to do with my abuser, yet all of you take her word for everything. No, actually, I lost over 24 friends, a girlfriend. I mean, ask Twisty. Twisty, if you're still here, you've seen the people come and go and flip on me. What are your thoughts? I don't understand how any of that would prevent you from adequately defending yourself. Again, why make the false claim of assault? She only gave a shit about herself and her wants. She literally broke like a dumbass her headphones. Like, let me be really clear. She was at work. Her brand new $180 headphones fell in the toilet because she was an idiot. She panicked and basically had to have someone else front. And then what did I do? Work with one of her headmates and buy her the headphones again. After I bought her a 4K camera and the blankets and a sterling silver ring. But I only care about me. I was always ignored or yelled at for breaking boundaries that she herself was breaking already. I never once told you about sexual acts that I've done. But my wants and needs never mattered to her. That's not true. She would just pressure me until she got her way. She weaponized her mental illness at every chance she got, but wouldn't excuse any of mine when it came to what she wanted. She repeatedly smashed through my discomforts and tried to paint my partners that she never once met as awful people because of the story you told.
Okay, and this is stupid because I have screenshots explaining this to her. Like, she tries to claim that, oh, they talked it over and they just decided not to do it again and that was enough. And okay, I guess that's enough for not dealing with it.
I also never asked her to get rid of her partners. I only wanted Amy gone. I just found the other ones unsafe, but I was fine with their existence. I just didn't want to interact.
Like, the issue was,
she removed, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, no, trying to get through to her in DMs. The ask for her the whole time was, hey, can you show that you and your partners actually understand consent?
That was the ask. It was really simple.
That was it. Can you actually show that you understand this stuff? That was it. We're all adults here. It would have been so easy for everyone to just be like, yeah, here's what I look for. Here's this. You don't even have to give, like, personal information. Just be clear about consent.
I mean, I know
How hard was that?
I know why I have problems with their partners because they showed no knowledge of consent and suck at communication, and I want nothing to do with them. I genuinely think they're dangerous people. She tried to demand I remove myself from my entire social circle because she didn't like Amy and made up an excuse to hate her more. One, I didn't make up an excuse. I literally talked this over with my therapist and was dealing with very real suicidal ideations because you kept trying to force the interaction and wouldn't actually police it properly. I also never asked her to leave her social circle because, again, as I showed you the screenshot, she wanted to retain her as a friend, and I said it was fine. You saw the screenshot earlier. You want to go back? Look at the screenshot. You can see my bottom part. If I have to get that whole screenshot, I will. She tried to pin my own headmate against me repeatedly. That's not true, ever. In fact, her headmate sabotaged things, and she didn't even have the balls to break up with me. She had Max do it. I suffered months of abuse from this vile woman. The one who offered to help her fix her car, who apologized at every time that she did something wrong. In the end, I tried only because she asked me to pretend that we were okay. I never asked that. I never said pretend. I said try. I thought maybe there was a chance, maybe things could improve, or seeing me in person could fix something. But then so that changes her story right there. We didn't do it. She thought there was a chance to fix things. This goes in line with what Zizi was saying. But then I was ambushed by her and Zena into topics they were already established as boundaries. I got to listen to them shout angrily at one another. I couldn't do it. We never shouted angrily at each other once, but go off. My trauma is being managed by my therapist and my handmate. I'm only okay because I found ways to be okay. Oh, right. The headmate that only came back because of the sheer amount of stress and panic that Poppy put me through. That's not what Max said. And also, she keeps saying she has a therapist. The 4 people she was sent online to look into were because of me. Because I know dating me can be hard, and we wanted her to have therapists, and she wouldn't get off her ass and do it.
Oh no, I told her multiple times, even early on, like, hey, if you actually want to be in a relationship with Poppy, you need to be in therapy. Like, if that's, like, you need to make sure that you are doing your personal work. Like, God, this is not that complicated.
And then she goes on here to talk about how I harassed her, but really it was just 2 Google Voice messages. This is part of the thing we saw earlier. That's not a good way to talk about someone who suffers from mental illness that you're actively making worse by your treatment of her and your refusal to cut off all contacts to keep yourself and her safe. Furthermore, don't imply that she raped you and then later rewrite the lore to retcon the implied plot line. Also, don't try to contact her place of work and try to maliciously damage her career, which she did.
Yeah, if that's not a sign that somebody's abusive, I don't know what fucking is.
Literally what Liana called it, and this is why Liana is fucking based, is it's abuse via institutions. And my bosses fell for it. I was just sent this. You think this is victim behavior? Are you literally insane? No, but you know what it is? Emotional distress, self-doubt, depression, fucked up eating habits, crying, sobbing, self-blame, etc., all of which Poppy has shown. Twisty, as far as I'm concerned, is family at this point. Based fucking Twisty. Like, that girl so far has been ride or fucking die. And now we get to the piece de la résistance. So this got debunked, or attempted debunk, because everyone got real mad that I dropped this. I'm going to read this in its entirety. She said she came there because we coerced her, but that's not what happened. This is her real feelings. This was on December 27th, 5 hours before Penelope, our editor, informed me that I was assaulted because I couldn't put 2 and 2 together because I was so utterly damaged. Listen to what she says here and tell me if sexual assault by deception is not implied in the second paragraph. Not to mention her deciding she wanted to try to fix things. All of her previous lies are fall apart here. I did want to fix things. I wanted to work on things. I've always felt like there were major issues we had were entirely too dangerous of topics to touch, despite them festering and causing problems. There were many times we did get into a topic, and while it may have gotten messy, we came out fine, if not better than before. I understand, and I am sorry that I fell into the same mistakes multiple times. You with me so far? I was trying my best to either avoid them or work through them with you. Some things aren't easily fixed after just one conversation, after all. Dealing with things in that way was and is rather new to me. I'm sorry I kept hitting the same rakes. I really was working on it to do better about it. I did ruin Christmas. I accept that that's on me entirely, or entirely on me. I wanted to try and fix things. I really did want that. Everything became very real and very difficult, though, for me. My mind felt entirely scrambled, and I had to work my way back through that. I lied about the sex stuff. I'm truly sorry for doing so. You were initiating, and in my mind, I did still have feelings for you. I want to make you happy. I wanted to make you happy. I'm not blaming you for the record. I genuinely cared and wanted to make you feel amazing during that. The next day, my head started clearing up more. Zizi wanted to leave. Notice there's no mention of wanting to sleep because this was all reciprocated. Myself having time to think a lot about thoughts of, to see how I'm reacting to you and the issues coming back up. I realized my feelings weren't there anymore. I had a lot of thoughts of why am I even bothering? This was a mistake. I tried to force myself to love you still, but I couldn't find it. I'm so sorry, Poppy. I don't know how to make things better, even just to be friends. I don't know how I could possibly make up for the shit I put you through. Therapy is obviously going to be a necessity for my own well-being. I know that. I don't think anything could improve without that at a minimum. I already paid back a chunk of money. It was my fault for ruining your trip and Christmas after all. The ticket thing, Zizi and I already talked about, but that's just stuff. That isn't a way to fix the emotional stress and trauma. If this isn't clear or if something I said sounds off, let me know. This was sent at 8 a.m. This is Penelope, the awareness is astounding. Do you guys see, based on everything we have presented today, that is her admitting to my allegation? Anyone who says otherwise is dishonest. They are lying. One's in chat if you see that for what it is. I also want to be clear that I'm the only person in the situation, to my knowledge, that filed a criminal report. I filed it with her city's police. They told me they couldn't pursue it, but the reality is that I still filed it, and I can still contact that city and get that file. But what Penelope says here, like, what that girl did to you, actually, it was as bad as sexual assault, in my humble opinion. Okay, it's not the same, because at this point we didn't have the language of assault via deception, but holy shit, her calling you abusive is the most disgusting fucking liar bullshit I've ever heard. One thing I want to bring up real quick is that the Moth brought something up that I didn't bring up earlier, because I think this is important. I love you, Haley. I love you too, Poppy, and I'm sorry for everything. I'll do a better apology later. Poppy, I don't know where to even begin. This is December 11th after a fight. I should have told you that the joke pushing boundaries that I had, but I didn't. I should have spoken up more or had Max help me set up some kind of scheduled time, perhaps that I could have had personal or quiet time to myself, but I didn't. I certainly should have expressed my fears about the calls being something that would occur multiple times in a weekend. This is actually what was bothering her. Do you remember earlier when I said that I thought that I had crossed a line? It was because we agreed to have a second call over that weekend. We normally had our date nights on Fridays. We had us on Sunday because Penny decided to front and cause fucking problems.
Well, there was other relationship issues that was not maintained. That's why that happened. So,
but also the shark could have chosen better timing. Anyway, I certainly should have expressed my fears about the calls being something that could occur multiple times in a weekend instead of just one time on Friday, but I didn't. Max is at my disposal, and I still stubbornly was trying to hold this to myself. I thought I could handle it. I very clearly could not, and I am so sorry. I'm sorry I held on to it and lashed out at you. I feel like I said one thing and started spiraling right away and just dumped it all on you and ruined your night and Zizi's night, all while you were dealing with far more important things than my bullshit. This is, by the way, the harassment campaign that she joined, because after I came out with my assault stuff, she joined up with all of the Tumblr blogs and all of the other people.
Oh, by the way,
who she was asked specifically not to hook up with, to not join with, because she knew the harm they were doing. She was told multiple times of the harassment campaigns against me.
She also she has a Tumblr page too, going, oh no, Poppy isolated me from all of her friends and I'm now a safe haven from Poppy. Dude, how many people do you think we fucking interact with day to day? Especially after all this shit. Like, we don't interact with that many people. It is a tiny fucking handful.
Oh.
And I feel bad about that because, God, I wish I could do more shit with the channel. But, like, no, she's the one with the fucking Tumblr page, doing the harassment campaign.
Joining in with the Zena and Poppy blogs and basically going off about every allegation they can come up with, including weaponizing my kids' lies. My kid that decided to lie about how they left and regularly would lie about their conditions, because we have actual proof of that, including bank statements showing their lies. But that's a segment for another time. I'm sorry I held on to all that lashed out. All while you were dealing with far more important stuff. Will try harder to do better, to be more open and clear about things that are bothering me, even if that means I still have to have Max and Penny work out a way to express that in language we both understand. Somehow those two understand each other, and I should use that to our advantage. I don't entirely understand what Max was trying to tell me about the consent stuff in CZ. The sex stuff was totally consensual. Sunday's call was consensual. The only hesitation was because I thought this might become some sort of precedent that I was open to more calls over the weekend than the ones we scheduled. I can't really handle that, and I know you and ZZ have things you try and get done beyond the time with me. That was my worry there. I still want you in my life as my partner, and of course I want Penny and Pepper in my life too. Thank you, Penny, for reaching out, Max. They weren't watching, and I was probably black splitting. Fuck, am I sorry for all of this? You didn't need this. You didn't deserve this. I'm sorry. I need you to look at a word for me. Black splitting. I didn't do shit. I pointed out certain things that looked similar and then provided the information. And what did she do? Adopt the language. White splitting and black splitting are terms used as colloquials for splitting, which is a tendency to idealize or devalue your fricking people you care about because you're afraid of abandonment. She called it black splitting because she lashed out at me and decided to completely attack me in this scenario. We then apologized and discussed the situation, and she actually apologized significantly. Just like when I had been talking crap about the relationship because I was spiraling myself earlier in the relationship around, I think, September, October, I put out an apology and deleted all my past bullshit. Do you understand how I was misaligned? Do you understand that she literally admitted to what she had done? Thank you so much, Naomi, for the $5. Because it's so late, I'm actually not going to go over the additional parts that Zena did. I'm just going to put them in the folder and you guys can read the 3-hour conversation in DMs about how she couldn't understand.
Now, I'm going to be honest.
Consent.
I go hard because at that point, I am the fourth person to come into that conversation because she is not.
And what she was essentially asked in that, real quick, is that she was asked, what method and model do you and your partners use for consent? And the answer was none. They had no conflict resolution, no concept of consent, beyond no means no. It was literally child logic. Go.
And I'm in here going like without any way to resolve conflict, no. Her version of just say that it didn't happen and then like not actually like do anything for the future to make sure that nothing happened, this is prevented. Like, that's not how you solve things. It's not resolution. There are steps to this. We teach them to kids all the fucking time. And the thing that I told her at the end was that she needed to get with Poppy and actually work out this consent stuff. This is my relationship, okay? Like, her and Poppy can figure out the consent, can figure out, like, what knowledge they need between them. And she didn't do that, ever. She never did that. She was supposed to get with Poppy and actually learn about consent. She didn't do it.
So,
all of this could have just been fucking prevented if she had done that. Which, like, I don't know how you get through fucking life without actually, like, going, oh, yeah, no, maybe I should think about what my partner's, consent is like.
Also, real quick, I gotta add this. Don't forget, she was either dating or directly in a relationship of some type with every member of my system. There are 3 members to my plural system. Poppy, Penny, and Pepper. Penny was her girlfriend. Pepper asked her to be her mom because Pepper got upset that she couldn't see me except in Headspace when Penny fronted. And so she wanted to in the world moms in the form of ZZ and Haley, because those were the 2 most important people to our system. She agreed to this and then decided to lie that there was no systems in place to maintain a relationship with Pepper, even though we had directly talked about them before if that breakup ever happened.
I had talked with her about this a few weeks before, and she just didn't even think that it happened.
Also, I want to show you something. This is just to, I guess, salt in my own wounds, I suppose. I decided to go on Etsy because she loves moths. In fact, we jokingly refer to her as the moth. You'll hear in the Sage stream that the moth deserves a special place in hell. It's because Sage is not happy with the girl that allegedly sexually assaulted me. But I want you to see, this is how the relationship worked in real time, not with the lies that other people are telling. We deeply loved each other. And she broke those agreements, and she broke the relationship when she used me. When she took advantage of my BPD that she had full knowledge of. So, right there is the sterling silver ring that I bought for her and me. This is mine because it arrived first. Right there is my engagement ring with Zena. Here's hers. This from a girl who could only wear one ring because it was a fidget ring. She wore this every day since I bought it, because she loved it, despite the fact that she hated wearing things, rings and didn't want to getting snagged on things. Genuinely cared for it. It was actually a big deal. And when she walked out of the hotel after leaving me utterly devastated and fucked up, I gave her the other one because I couldn't look at it on my hand. I am tired of being gaslit on this shit. I am so tired of being told by ex-friends that what happened to me didn't happen because it's inconvenient for them, for their business, for their optics, or in the case of some, for their fucking bottom line. My story has not changed once. I have only added things as I figured them out in therapy. My own therapist fucked up and literally tried to dissuade the session into a different direction when I first brought this up. And I had to spend the next session chewing her out because I felt so not seen. I loved this woman, and I still love this woman with every fiber of my fucking being, and that's not just borderline. And she tore me apart again and again by violating the most simple boundaries, by refusing to be clear about what she wanted, to make boundaries so I would accidentally cross them and not know it, to lie about me and say that I assaulted her and then take it back. I am a trans woman. I know what these allegations do. I wouldn't bring them up if they weren't real. But she throws them out as just a quick backpedaling, just a way to throw this out, when I can tell you the 2 separate sexual interactions we had, the first one was entirely consensual. I know, because she's the one that unsnapped her leotard. And she's the one that held down my head. I have had to sit through this entire segment straight-faced, having to talk about this in the abstract, because I wanted to make it clear that this is not just my story. It is millions of people's stories. And in every case, they are shut down. They are gaslit. They are slut-shamed. I have been literally said that every bad excuse has been used to take away what was done to me. My own borderline diagnosis, which was confirmed by someone who is the head of a major college, and every test I've ever taken is robbed from me, and I'm told I'm a narcissist because I advocated for myself and had boundaries. Something I've struggled to have in every past relationship. I did not deserve this. I gave this woman everything. I spent thousands of dollars on her between trips, between the airplane tickets she stole and never paid back.
For the trip that never happened, yeah.
For the trip that never happened at the end of January. The hotel in her hometown, 6 minutes from her house, so she could spend Christmas with someone and actually have a meaningful Christmas, because she never did. Because none of her fucking partners ever had the balls to actually go see her. Hell, I offered to help her with her car when it was breaking down so her and her ex-fiance, who she shares a bed with still, Zeke, because they can't separate the rooms for some reason. Yes, she still stays in a bed with her trans man ex-fiance she dumped because he transitioned, because she doesn't like men, fair enough, but still has the monetized videos on her OnlyFans of Zeke and her doing some shit, but go off. But the reality is that I wanted to make sure that they could all get to work because her and all of her partners work at the same place. I haven't doxed her. I haven't used her legal name, even though I have it. I have her birth date. I have huge quantities of her identity I haven't touched. Why? Because I have fucking principles. Because I care about her safety, even though she clearly doesn't care about mine. This woman cost me a job I loved with a friend I had had for 2 decades. And somehow, through her and her friends' bullshit, they proceeded to persuade a person who has been protecting me and caring for me for the last several years. The person I convinced to go for their counseling degree, who wouldn't have never been my boss if I hadn't told them to do it. And I lost a job I loved and clients I cared about. I am not going to be told any longer that I did these things. I did not abuse her. In fact, when I ever came close to ever being anywhere near that line, and I never got near it, I apologized immensely. I tried to cover my stuff. I asked for relationship accommodations, things I've never asked for in a relationship. When she was spending her time in Seattle with her awful partner, I asked for hour-long phone calls because I wanted to stay connected. And even her partner said that was reasonable. I deserve to be believed, not shut down, and not lose 2 dozen of my friends and my fucking partner. I lost an entire partner over this because they didn't like the optics of how I was handling it. I've lost friends because they didn't like how I was handling it, ignoring the fact that my trauma and the shit that I go through made me afraid to sleep in certain rooms. When we got home, I had to have the full lights on because I had panic attacks in the low light, because it felt claustrophobic, because I was afraid I was going to get hurt again. I had regular dreams and fucking reenactments in my goddamn head of this shit, being afraid. I have 2 memories of those sexual encounters. One was the one before I knew what was going on, and the one when I realized what happened. This was a woman that I saved certain acts for because I had actually never done them with a trans woman before. I have things that I haven't done before, such as fellatio. Never did that before, but I did it.
And this was the first time after bottom surgery. Like, this
that
was
I allowed
literally
for someone to penetrate me.
the first time.
And she knew how much these things fucking mattered to me. She fucking knew. She knew that we were struggling, and she decided to frame us as toxic and bad when she was the one who created the fucking conflict by her weird fucking behavior of not giving an inch.
Well,
not acknowledging
like,
anything that she did wrong.
And not actually, like, taking space when she needed to. In fact, just outright refusing to actually be direct about when she needed something.
Oh, and the so-called, like, me diagnosing her, the 2 inventories I had her do, which were the MID and the PID, both showed there weren't borderline symptoms. Told her to keep those. Take her to her therapist. That way it's one thing off the list, hopefully. I try to be helpful to my friends. I try to give them information so that they can make good decisions with their therapist, the people who work with them. And she decided to weaponize it against me. What did I fucking do? What? I wanted an answer to the moving in question. I wanted to know because it was driving me insane. It was leaving me constantly afraid of abandonment. It was leaving me suicidal. I just wanted to know that I mattered. And she couldn't even give me that. She apologized. She worked with me. You've seen now 2 different screenshots where she actively said that our relationship had really good points where we worked through things. But she goes online and yells at Twisty and Heather and everyone else and tries to frame me as a fucking monster. I wish. Actually, this says it better than I fucking can. I wish I was the monster you think I am. Because then things would make sense. Because then I would know that I did something. But I've asked my therapist, my friends, my partners. I've tried to make it make sense, and it doesn't. This woman took me through the ringer for no reason other than she couldn't handle a real relationship because God knows her current ones are just fucking child's play. She's dating a 27-year-old, a 24-year-old, and someone who was 19 when they met, who's now 20. because she's emotionally childish and can't date people who actually want real adult relationships. No, it's just these randos who basically do not provide for her, and she's told me in confidence that several of them she would break up with. The young one, because that's probably not a salvageable or sufficient relationship, and the girl that she supposedly broke up with, because that one can't communicate during sex.
I am also sick of the online left weaponizing this shit against my partner. Like, seriously, I'm the one that gets to go to bed with her every night. And, yeah, no, neither of us really sleep. You wonder why we haven't streamed lately? Yeah, no, sleep is pretty fucking rough.
Let me be really clear of something. We have other segments coming up covering other aspects of the harassment campaign. But I'm going to say the same thing after each of them, because this is one part of it. There are still 2 other big parts and a bunch of subparts too. A bunch of people haven't been held to account yet. The people that doxed me, or tried to at least. The people that decided to make up shit about me walking around my house when I tried to help this kid, and we offered them, actually did give them money if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. That kid can't see outside of their own fucking reactions that other people exist.
And talk about my child, the one that I took in when my partner was 3 months pregnant, the one that's not biologically related to me, because what I learned in therapy was that they spent every relationship I was in getting to the 2-year mark and then sabotaging them. But you know what? We'll save those for another time. But at the end of each of these, I'm going to say the same thing. I am done with the online left. Done. It does not exist. I do not believe in it.
Yeah, no, we're both on that page. Like Sage said, we're a fucking island now.
They keep calling it an island. We've always been an island ever since the bimbo politics thing. I keep calling it the containment arc. We don't come out. We're done. If people want to talk to us, that's fine. But the reality is that I refuse to call myself part of this group. I'll stand in solidarity with some people.
If there's an event that requires it, sure.
Or the content creators who haven't backstabbed me or made shit up about me.
Or who claim to know us and have like intimate details on us when really they don't actually interact with us and haven't in years.
Like, apparently, because the idiot who tried to dox me is throughout her community, Keffels made the argument that I tried to drag her into the drama when I asked her how to deal with harassment in DMs. I'll pull that DM up if I have to. But she decided to go on stream and say I was trying to pull her into the drama, and then she blocked me on Twitter when I was tagging her in things that were relevant, because at the time she was dealing with the sexual assault claims that were being made by her abusive ex, and I was dealing with the bullshit with No. And we had been previously at least acquaintances, if not friends. Guess not. So, real quick, never covering her again. Ever. I don't care what she does. I don't care what happens. Unless it is something incredibly, overwhelmingly important, you will never see another video about her on this channel. There's also an article written by Annie that is quite good. And if people can post that in the chat, it goes over the history of trans women being fucked over and how they themselves then give into there and become part of the abuse squad. Happened with Contra, Effels, etc. So if someone can post that link in both chats, please do so. I need you guys to understand this. I love this woman with every fiber of my being. I wanted her in my life for as long as I could have her. Because I've never felt such a connection with someone besides my fiance. And she squandered it. She ignored things. She refused to try to actually engage. And when she did, when there was these glimmering moments like I showed you, they didn't last. It's because of this harassment campaign that I'm basically disowning my own kid. The two people that are my adopted kids, Evan and Shiloh, my trans boys, love them to death. In the last 6 months, they have been more children than my kid had been for 10 years of their life. And one of the reasons why it took me so long to realize that situation, and we'll get to that later, but the big reason is because every time that they would start whining, I'd dissociate because I had a lot of guilt from being a shitty parent when I was younger. But no, they make a Tumblr up, go to Melina, and then when Melina talks to me and, has a change of heart, they weaponize the stuff and show out of context screenshots that then ex-friends go and run with.
And ex-friends that know the fucking details, know the actual truth. Also, there's one claim that I need to die in a fire.
Hold on. Zoomy Deer said, I had heard her say that like the day after what's his name streamed about you. I typed in chat under a spoiler that I recommended helping you out. I don't remember being told off about it. I hope that sounds great. Zoomy Deer, I deeply appreciate that. That's fucking based. Like, thank you. And again, if she's willing to reach out, I'm willing to rescind my idea. I just can't. To be just when I have defended Keffel so many times, to have someone just say something so dishonest about me because they're listening to someone in their community who is giving them bad information. Guys, I can't do this. These people had me choose between you and my job, and because my job was being unfair, I chose this. And you know what? I do choose this. And I choose to come out with no restrictions. I'm going to hold to my ethics, my personal and my professional ones. But you know what? There are going to be more streams. There are going to be us bringing up our issues. We're going to keep going.
I'm on the same page as Poppy as all this. We're both together on this one.
The thing I keep going back to is philosophy. Everything is chaos. Nothing happens for a reason, but as sentient creatures, we have to respect. She chose to add it. Her reasons are her own, but she was... So the last thing I'll bring up tonight, and then I will end this segment because we've been going for fuck all. There has been this framing that's been given by our detractors, let's call them. And one of the things they argue is that we're a cult. Not only do we have Nightwile, who is a survivor of human trafficking and a cult, who literally knows the bite model and has assessed our community, and who I consider a dear friend.
Mm-hmm.
We're not cult-like in the slightest. Despite the personal claims of my former boss, who was taking stuff from the hate blog seriously, which is idiotic. And one of the claims is because you either agree or you get booted. And that has never been the case in our server. In fact, you can go through any of the channels, any of them, any of the ones I posted in, anytime I brought up something, no one has been booted for having a different opinion. There's one thing, one line. I was assaulted. I was abused. If you try to gaslight me on that, or you try to argue it, or you try to semantics definition me, or any of this nonsense, you're done. I do not want you in my life. I do not want you near me. I, in fact, consider you a dangerous person for me and mine. That all said, this is why we haven't been streaming. Because we had the unfortunate aspect of we couldn't bring this stuff up on stream while I was still working where I was because I would be punished for it. I was told this directly. And on the other side, I had so many people coming at me and flipping on me that I was grieving every single day. I miss my boss. I miss him because he was a dear friend. And yet I had to block him because he couldn't actually acknowledge that I was assaulted. He couldn't actually do that. He couldn't. I miss my ex-girlfriend. I really deeply cared for her. The one that broke up with me over the optics, no. I miss Fesh. I loved having Fesh in chat. I think Fesh was a wonderful person, and to see what he has done and how he acts now is so repugnant, so weird. I don't understand it. I keep thinking someone's taking over his accounts. And as more people speak out about false bullshit claims, more people come into the water for blood, including blood. So what it comes down to is that we're not going anywhere. If you want to try to deplatform us, be my guest. I fully deny all of this bullshit you fuckers keep saying online. And those of you who are former friends know better. You know what you're doing.
Many of you were sexually assaulty.
Some of you were, yeah. So I just want to say for the record, the same thing we sung at the beginning of stream. Let's begin. I'm going to make you wish that we stayed gone. When I'm done, your status quo will know its race is run. Oh, this will. That's why Alistair is the fun. Because it's me sticking a flag in the ground along with my partner and saying, enough is enough. I'm done. I'm not taking this. To those of you who have stayed around, Annie, Ghost, Naomi, Nightwile, Harmsy, Twisty, and all the people who...
All the people still on our mod team with us, too.
And all the people watching right now being supportive. Thank you. Because this is the response I didn't get when I came out with this.
What I got was pushback and silence. What I got was lies. I had a person come into my fucking DM, speak highly of a person, because I was concerned about No being in a Discord server for writers, and I tried to meet with the leader of it, and that person berated me and jumped me. My best guess is because
everything.
and then they outed everything in an entirely out of context way, and I guess decided to be abusive towards me, and then, I don't know, maybe because they want to fuck no. I don't know. Have fun with that. It wasn't the bestest. I love this community and I love this channel, and I'm going to keep building it and growing it. And regardless of where I end up working and what happens, this is where I take my seat. This is where I take this is where I take myself to share the things I've learned. I'm not backing down on this. You will not silence me.
And Poppy's always going to have me too.
And I wanted to speak to something real quick because we don't have a lot of time, but I just want to bring up one little thing. Just a minute. Just a minute of your time. I apologize. Just a minute. I'm not the only one that was traumatized by this. ZZ plays it off as very strong because ZZ's a badass. But the reality is that this damaged them a lot because they had to watch me spiral. They're the ones that had to take our firearms out of the house to make sure I didn't hurt myself. The firearms, by the way, that were stored at my boss's house, the person who knew how bad it got. I don't have much else to say other than I love this community. I love the people who have supported me and the people who have stood by me. And I'm sorry that this segment turned out so long and it had to happen. Do not harass no. Do not. That is a single warning. If anyone in our community does that, they will be banned from everything.
Not go after her personal life either. Do not
talk shit about her. Do not do anything to her. We are better than that. Do not give her ammunition to lie. And with that said, see you in the next one. Bye.
Let's be